All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to have Mad Lions head coach Mac with me for today's episode of Voice of Yamato. First interaction I had with you, Mac, was I remember it was on a PGL. This was the first year. I remember this was the season where COVID struck hard. I remember I was we were on PGL. I met you and Kazi, and I remember that how you were talking, even though it was an interview, I felt like there was something so genuine about you in terms of how you work with players, and that felt so relatable. And ever since, I've been very intrigued to follow your career and your progression. You need to pay attention to the competition to some degree. And I remember watching that best of 5 against G2 that you guys won, and I know that every time I've been in competition against you, I counted the best of 5s. We're currently 1-1, which is a good number, but you won the important one, the final, back in 2021. All in all, I want to say that I have a great deal of respect for what you do, and I want to start off by asking, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks. I mean, those are some very kind words. I'm going to one-up you, though, and say that I remember an earlier interaction with you, actually, which was when I was still... Yeah, 2018.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, 2018-19. I was still an assistant coach on Splyce back then.
Okay.
And I remember, we had the best of 5 for third place in spring 2018 in Copenhagen.
Oh, yes.
And all throughout those...
then you're 2-1. Sorry.
No, I mean, not as a head coach, though. Not as a head coach.
Okay.
That's okay. We won't count that one. That was a long time ago. But I remember actually making a tweet at the end of, I think it was like 2018 or 19. I can't remember now which one now. Listing the coaches that had made the effort to come and shake mine and Duke's hands at at the end of a series, because it was really not like common back then.
Yeah.
And you were one of the lucky few, very respectful and sportsmanlike coaches. So there you go.
Okay. No, I'm glad. It was a good memory. I was starting to think like, did I do something bad? Was it because it's such a long time ago? Maybe I did some dumb shit. Because you grow as you go. How did that transition? Like your start in Splyce. It's like I saw Bulldog Esports, and I have to admit I don't know Bulldog Esports. What's going on here? How did everything start for you from the beginning?
Oh, from the beginning. So, from the beginning, I graduated from uni, and then kind of during my final year of uni, I got a wrist injury. When did I get this wrist injury? Like 2014, I want to say, yeah.
Okay.
And then I graduated in 2016, and I was still struggling with it, so I'd stopped playing League, and I started coaching some of my old friends in League because I didn't ever hang out with them anymore.
Okay.
Because I wasn't playing League, that was kind of the only way that we connected, like playing League or playing World of Warcraft. So I kind of lost contact with a lot of my friends, and so I started coaching some of them for fun. And then friend team disbanded, because playing ranked with your friends is actually not that enjoyable sometimes.
100%.
And yeah. That's relatable. And then I went on Reddit and tried to find a new team, and it was I got in touch with, I can't even remember the team anymore. It was this was back in the kind of Wild West days where you didn't really have team names. It was looking for org type teams or whatever. Like random Bumbador type team names, like these types of things, And I ended up coaching a Latin America South Challenger Series team from my bedroom. With 9-hour time difference or whatever it is, maybe it was 6, I can't remember. But they're doing their scrims at 6 p.m. their time, and it's midnight my time, and I'm staying up late and missing lectures because I was coaching this team or watching their scrims or doing officials or whatever it was. It kind of went from there, and same thing happens eventually. That team kind of disbands or whatever. Go on Reddit, find another team that ended up being the team of Mr. Grant Rousseau, who is the guy that eventually ended up hiring me to Splyce, along with Peter. He went on then to work in Guild. Now I think he's working with a Saudi team, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And yeah, kind of I guess one thing led to another. The story for meeting Peter and eventually getting to Splyce is that there was a kind of looking for work Skype chat back in the day. And Peter posted, this is classic Peter, posted a kind of open notice for interviewing candidates for a head analyst position at INTZ. And I had an interview with Peter. It went well. Then I ended up getting an offer to work with Origin in Challenger Series, which was the, do you remember the motivation work improvement team?
Yes,
team?
yes.
that was the first thing I saw right after I signed my contract, which was a banger. So I went there instead, and then that kind of went down the pan, and I went. Then I went back to Peter and was like, "Well, it went to shit," and so I worked with INTZ for a bit remotely, and then after that, some of the Origin players asked me if I would come and join Millennium with them.
Who were those guys back then? I'm trying to remember the names from the Origin roster.
So the Origin roster was originally, there were roster changes, but originally it was Dan Double D, then it was Zanny, then it was Scarlet Red Hands, then it was Neon, and no, it wasn't Neon. Neon was later. It was Darkside and Quickseth initially.
Oh, I see. Okay. Trying to connect my brain to the timeline, and this made it a lot easier for sure.
Yeah, it ended up being Neon and what was the other guy? He played Brandon Tom Kench. I can't remember his name now. Damn, forgotten it. But yeah, and that was a one big mess. And then I went on to Millennium, which was Neon, Scarlet, Nero, Cass, who then later on came to join me in Mad.
Yes.
And Dalek, who I believe is still playing in the LFL.
Okay.
And then after I did like a few tournaments in the LFL, and then Peter got the job at Splyce, and Grant also got the job at Splyce, and they brought me along to Splyce.
No, it's lovely when you've like collected friends along the path, and it's like the people that you hold close and you feel like you share values with, you kind of hope that somewhere along the line you can kind of reunite, because it's like esports is small, but at the same time not in some kind of weird way. It's kind of crazy that every one of you united. Before we move on to the Splyce story, right, and the progression in Splyce, I wanted to ask you, what was the wrist injury that you had? Did you feel like you could be really good at the game? Were you at that point, or were you like a League of Legends enjoyer? Could we have had a timeline where Mac was like Western Faker, but this wrist
very
injury?
Unlikely, very unlikely. So at the time that my wrist got injured and I had like peaked in like Diamond 5 with like, I don't know, like I had just hit Diamond 5 with like 80% win rate or something. So it was actually like pretty good at that point. But like I had been slowly climbing throughout the seasons. I had like played, I played League since season 1. So I've been here a while.
Same. I'm losing my hair, but you have gorgeous hair,
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think like I don't play League anymore, but I had like I don't know. I think I have an account with like 5,000 normal games or something like that. But the longest time I was a Shaco one trick, and that's how I got most of my elo, playing like Shaco and Nunu and like Jarvan.
Definitely from season 1.
Yeah. I literally learned to jungle from watching like Trick 2G flashing over walls and eating people's fucking blue buffs at level 1 as Nunu. That was like my favorite thing. When I played jungle, I like it when the enemy jungler like I like not letting him play the game. That's the most satisfying thing, is when the guy's just like.
So Schadenfreude, you just want to see other people suffer.
Exactly.
No, I can relate
that was
to that.
very much my jungle style. I liked any champion that you could do that on. Just make one person's life hell, because I personally think that solo queue is like a mental test more than anything else, And like your job in solo queue as the jungler is to break the enemy team's mental, like one of their players' mental, before like your teammates' mental breaks, So you just pick one person and you make their life hell.
No, for sure. I think that's very true. And I think it has gotten more and more true with time as players get to this phase where they are just, it's no longer they're playing it for the purpose of fun. You have like that a majority of player base, they keep playing because they're addicted. Then I think that frustration is just cooking and boiling over. and you can use the strategy easier and easier because I feel like, especially with earlier surrender votes, opens, it's like the meta has developed so much in terms of how you end games quick. The frustration button is easier to press with time, it seems. So I think it's definitely a valid strategy.
Yeah, man. Players got nothing on the old players in terms of mental strength. Like when you were a top laner in the past and you were like level 2 at 13 minutes, like, that was just your life. But you asked me about my wrist injury actually, which I didn't answer. So, I actually still have it to this day, and it's something that I kind of live with. It's not something I talk about that much. But basically, I actually used to be a semi-professional circus performer.
Oh wow!
So I was a juggler.
Okay.
And I had kind of just reached the stage where I was doing like paid gigs fairly regularly and things like that. So, you know, I can juggle knives and fire and
holy
balance
shit,
miscellaneous objects on my face
God.
And things like this. Yeah. I'm a really obsessive person. So when I get into something, it like dominates my life. And when I arrived at uni, I joined a circus society. I went to uni in Leeds, which is in the north of the UK.
Okay.
And it just happened to be the case that the circus society in Leeds had some of like the best circus performers in the UK who just went there to like practice and have fun and meet circus people. Like Leeds was just a big circus hub. So I got super inspired by it, really addicted to it. Like one of the people that taught me to juggle is like the person that literally like, okay, so there's a meta in juggling of like how juggling tricks work. And like, it's the same as any competitive like sport, right? Where the like things that you didn't think were possible last year are suddenly possible now because someone's broken the meta for it, right? Like how the 5-minute mile used to be like beyond human capacity and now it's like normal.
Yeah.
So some of the people who taught me were like in their day like world record holding like new trick inventing 8-ball juggling phenomenons who are insane. It was crazy. I remember walking into like one of the first training sessions. I see this guy, he's riding a unicycle, he's playing a guitar in one hand and he's juggling 3 balls in the other. And I'm like, okay.
Oh my goodness. That is
amazing.
So insane. Holy moly. So you're juggling knives. Yeah. Like how many knives are we talking here?
Only 3. I can only do 3 knives. Okay. I can do 3 knives or 3 torches, or I can do 5 balls.
Holy moly. Okay. And
I can't do 5 balls very well though. But yeah, so that ended up leading to that and like gym and like hardcore World of Warcraft and lots of League of Legends, like all the things that are bad for your hands, I did them. Like that put strain on your arms, and I ended up getting a pretty nasty case of tendonitis.
Oh shit!
Both hands on both sides of my forearms. Yeah. So normally you get tendonitis like here, and this is like we call it tennis player's elbow, I think, or I can't remember which one is tennis player's elbow, but there's a tendon attachment here on this side of your forearm, and there's a tendon attachment like here on this side of your forearm as well. And I got it in both sides of both arms, like at the same time.
Jesus.
Which was really intense. And honestly, I'm still kind of living with it. So I actually don't play games at all anymore.
Okay.
I also can't or haven't been able to for long periods of time do a lot of kind of repetitive or strenuous tasks. So I used to go to the gym and lift weights and stuff like that a lot. I can't anymore.
Sure.
I actually, instead of typing and using a mouse, I use like special assistive software. I use dictation software. So if I type a message to you, it's a message that I've like spoken into the mic, and there's a lovely program called Dragon Naturally Speaking, which dictates what it tells you. Okay. Which dictates what you've spoken. So yeah, but it's also one of the reasons why Mad has a big coaching staff, because there's a lot of stuff that I like can't do. I need a lot of help.
Okay. Wow. No, that's intense. That's in both arms.
Yeah.
No, I can relate to the obsession part. I was lucky that I got my injuries in my legs growing up, so I could still type. But holy moly, that's crazy, man. Holy moly, tendonitis in both arms. That is nuts. I don't think I've ever heard that. That is crazy, man. I feel nice though. Now I can think all your messages. I would just hear them in your voice now, even more evidently than previously. So I didn't know. It's like always interesting to me when I hear about like a topic that I haven't explored too much, but how as long as there's humans and passion involved, then it's so engaging somehow. You know. So I've never I never thought about juggling at all, but now I'm like curious to figure out who are the best jugglers, you know, who are the fakers of juggler, like what are the type of competitions, you know. I'm so curious now. I'm just hooked.
There's a wonderful saying that I heard once, which is that carbon atoms do some really wonderful and crazy things when you give them a couple of billion years.
Yeah. Makes sense. No, for sure.
They get up to some crazy shit. Wait, what happened with your legs? You had an obsessive competing type story?
I think it was just, it's like I was playing a lot of football, and then at some point it's like I just addicted to just running outside, playing football all the time. And then at some point I think I just started growing too fast while I was running, and then both my knees I just couldn't walk anymore. Like both of my knees. Whoa. I have like scarring on my knees from like the skin just being fucking stretched out because of how fast I grew, and it was just a combination of just too much tension and at the same time growing at the same time. I don't know what the word is for it in English, but there's like some common term for it. And at some point I tried to ignore it, which just kind of made it worse. And then at some point I just got rooted at home. I was pretty much just sitting at the PC, but it was kind of a blessing because it was the best excuse I could ever have to just keep playing League of Legends. So it was a blessing and a curse, I guess.
Yeah. And in a way, that's how both of us ended up how we are, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here if I had not had a wrist injury.
No, it's crazy how it's like some doors close, new ones open. It's crazy how it kind of goes. You mentioned how you've how the staff around you is so important. I'm kind of curious now. Your transition into Splyce, you've worked in so many different alterations of what your coaching staff is, because you're probably the only coach that has worked with a team for so long in Europe, right? Is this your 5th or 4th year already?
Wait, 18, 19, 20, 21. This would be my 6th.
Oh, 6th even. Yeah. That is like that is tenure right there. Well.
I don't know anyone else apart from Freddie potentially, because I think 2018 was the year he joined Roccat, which eventually became Rogue, which eventually became Koi.
Oh, so true,
I think it's me and Freddie being the long-standing ones.
Yes. No, that is a dream, at least in my mind. It's like at least when I join a team, I try to work with the intention that I'm going to work there forever, because otherwise I wouldn't want to be engaged in the entire process of how a team is being ran. It's like the values and the principles need to kind of align, and if you're going to go along with things you disagree with, I feel like eventually you reach a point where it doesn't feel as good to work for something. Your time in Mad Lions, so you've been now in Mad Lions, and I can't even imagine. It's like when I'm in off season and I'm thinking, what are the potential teams that I would like to join? It's like Mad Lions is not on my list. It's like they're working with Mac. That's never going to change. That's going to be, the dynamic, that is Mac's team. How has it been? Like, how has that relationship worked? Like, why is it that you've worked together for so long?
So I would say that the number one reason that comes to mind is Till, who is our, what is his title now? Director of Operations, something senior, something or other. European Director of Operations. I don't know. He's a director. And Till joined Splyce just a little bit after me in 2018. We're now, I believe, the only 2 people apart from Jake, our performance manager, who are still here in the entire company.
Jake is the Viking, right? He's the Viking man.
Yes, Jake is the Viking. Yeah, I think we are the only 3 employees that were around when it was still Splyce nowadays. Apart from, that's perhaps not true. I mean, I think, so Splyce got bought by OAM at the end of 2019, so the OAM guys will still count. But yeah, and Till started off as a videographer in Splyce, and then we ended up having a lot of issues with the team management side, so we changed team manager, and it kind of happened that people in the team, players, staff, everyone realized that when they had problems, if Till was around, those problems got resolved. And so they just started going to Till with everything, and we ended up with him just doing all of the management stuff, and he just kind of became the manager overnight. And then through 2018-19, he was there the whole time, and then he got promoted to general manager, and then he got promoted to director, and then he got given more teams. Like then he's he's overseeing the off season. Now he oversees like the entirety of Europe. That now he actually does the like signing, onboarding, roster building, hiring coaches for like every franchise team that OAM has, which is Call of Duty, Overwatch League, Valorant, League of Legends. Like if we have a team, then Till is the one that's building the team. So he's like, he and I have been kind of a duo whenever it comes to like improving about how to build a good team, basically how to build a good organization, how to plan for the long term. Like anything that we have kind of done differently at Mad Lions has been because because Till and I, and then later on Adam from 2019, who was the CEO and is now he's currently the interim CEO for OAM. I think before he was CFO. I'm not very good with titles, but yeah, like it's because us three like kind of agreed on it, right?
Okay.
So I would say that's the kind of the biggest stabilizing factor at Mad Lions behind the scenes. I think you're right that when people think of Mad, a lot of the time they think of me. I think the person that they should also think about is Till, because Till's been here like the whole time, and so many of the decisions that we make on like an organizational level just come down to him.
Okay. No, that's interesting. No, I have some vague memory. Maybe my memory is crazy, but I also remember working with Till, and he was a videographer. And
yeah.
it's kind of surreal to hear that over the span of the last couple of years, he turns out to be such a gangster. This is like such a esports success story, you know. It's like you're in a team, something's not working, someone just gotta fix it, and then they become really good at it. And it's crazy how in esports you go through the school of hard knocks, basically through experience. Most of the time, you grow if you just engage yourself in it. So would you say that through your cooperation with Till and Jake, that you feel like your values align and you feel like you can have the right amount of influence on all of the decisions surrounding the performance of the League of Legends team?
Yeah, definitely. I think like overall philosophy and kind of buy-in from upper management is the big thing. Like if I kind of think about your previous question of like what's it like to be at an org for that long, like those are the big things. And if I have friends who are like asking for, hey, I'm thinking about going for this team, like what do you think? You know, I have these options, I'm not sure which one I like the best, blah blah blah. The thing that I always tell them is like, does the upper management see things the way that you do? Do they buy into the things that you want to do with the team? Do they agree on your long-term vision, stuff like this, right? Because that's ultimately the big thing that I have at Mad Lions that makes me not want to leave, is that I know I have like full trust from Till. Like Till and I are a duo when it comes to kind of long-term strategy for the org, and we have buy-in from Adam, who is our kind of like, we report into Adam on this is what we think the future of League of Legends in Europe looks like. This is what we think is the best course of action from a performance standpoint for Mad Lions in the next 2 to 3 years, right? So yeah, definitely we have the same overall views, and I mean that's natural because Till and I like built up our views of how to build a good team together over multiple years. So you know, if we saw something that we liked that G2 did, or we saw something we liked that Fnatic did, or we saw something we liked that whoever, I don't know, the San Antonio Spurs did, or I read a book about management, or Till reads a book about like whatever, or I read a book about military history, like I share it with Till. And we build up our understanding of how to run an effective organization together.
Okay. That's super nice to hear. I think it's so important that on all levels, the process needs to be predetermined before the results come in, because I think that on a micro level, if I look from the standpoint of what team decisions are within, like with players and draft or whatever, like when I think of like these smaller decisions, sometimes they can also be very reactionary, and then sometimes the pressure from upper management can also be reactionary. I think it's so important to, the same way as you align with the players what you're doing in the day-to-day, how the overview of a season, you need to also be able to align, and the process needs to be in place, rather than, oh, we're losing, you need to fucking chase something, what the fuck is happening? Like that type of management that just creates this big shadow over your head the moment something, you know, plays out in a way that maybe isn't favorable. Because in the end, League of Legends and any team game or any sport for that matter can be very volatile in terms of what the result is. So I'm very happy to hear that that's what you have at Mad Lions, because that's the only way I could imagine, that you work with the same team for so long, right?
Definitely. I mean, it's quite bizarre actually, because we're one of the only. Are we the only? I think we might be the only US owned, or like we're Canadian owned now, but before we were owned by Marty Strentzevilk, who was in North America. Our head office is in Rochester. Laser Chickens, yes. Our head office is. I mean, of course, you know him. I mean, our head offices are in Rochester, as I imagine you know as well, right?
Yes,
yes. So we've always had like upper management at a distance. So there's like over the years, there's a lot of like, for sure, there's a lot of like, we lose a really bad game, and then whoever it is in upper management is like, oh my god, do I need to be worried? And I think part of the whole process of being a head coach is also, a lot of it is about understanding how to set the correct expectations towards your upper management, right? Like, and to get them bought into the process of, this is the like expectation we have for the year. This is what we're looking for the year. These are our key performance indicators for the year. These are the key performance indicators for these particular players. These are the questions we need answers to by the end of the year in terms of what we think that, how we think that this person slots into the roster or whatever it is, right? So that you can always refer back to that process and be like, it's okay. Like, we expect a certain degree of volatility here because of XYZ, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why we've had a lot of leeway when it comes to working with rookies as well, because we're really clear about making sure that the expectation is, around this player is that they're going to be volatile, or the expectation around this player is that they're a very emotional person, and so if the emotional atmosphere is disturbed within the team, you're going to see a drop off in their performance or things like this, right? So I think the communication between the head coach and the upper management is really important, and it's something that's very often neglected.
100%. Agreed. I think that's very, very common in esports, this level of disconnect. I think it's so important that it always boils down to communication. It's like, if what you expect from the players is something that needs to happen within the coaching staff too, where everyone needs to be aligned and have the same ideas, and the ability to converse about concerns and issues and about the future. It needs to all be in the open, and that extends to the upper level management too. 100% agree with you on that. I wanted to ask you in terms of your transition to the head coach position after Peter Dunn moved on to EG. There was my main question in regards to that. How did you prepare for that transition? Because I assume that it came with so much more new responsibilities.
So honestly, there was a world where I was never a head coach at all, mostly because of my confidence around like my ability to do the role and deal with stress with regards to like my injury. Like, for some more context, like my hands have ended up being like a kind of chronic source of pain for me over the last X years now, however long it is, like 7-8 years. And that's really hard. So dealing with like increased levels of stress, and also that like things impact me quite strongly, which is one of the reasons why Mad has this culture of being so wellness focused. It's also because it's not like just a nice thing to have. It's because I don't function well without that. And that kind of made me believe that I actually wasn't going to be a head coach. So like in Splyce, like Peter was kind of raising me and Duke up to be the kind of next head coaching candidates for Splyce. And at the end of 2018, like Duke ended up being the one that was kind of more apt for being on stage and being in a leadership role, which I think was the right decision at the time, because he has like a much bigger personality than I do, frankly. He's the type of personality that expands to fit whatever gap it's in. And he was great for the team in that year. So and like Duke and I were super, super, super close. Like we still are. But back then it was like we were going to be a duo. When we went into the off season that year, we explicitly stated to all the teams that like wherever we're going together. And so I was actually happy. I had a conversation with him at the end of 2019, being like dude, like you go somewhere, I'm going to follow. I'm happy to just like be a number two. and be the strategic coach by your side for like we be a duo. We go there, we go wherever it is, and we build something good together. That was the plan. Actually, that was the end of 2018. Sorry, because what happened at the end of 2018 was that then like this whole franchising debacle happened with Splyce, where we almost didn't make franchising, and there was a stage at which we thought we were out. And then it turned out that we weren't out, so we were all back in Splyce. And yeah, long story short, at the end of 2019, Duke had the opportunity to go to Vitality, which was great for him, and he took it. And I was considering leaving and going with him.
No, please, sorry for interrupting you. Continue.
I've forgotten that. Yeah, you forget how like where people used to be. Then like he was gonna leave to Vitality, and I was like strongly considering going with him. And then kind of basically Peter said like stay, and kind of I will like transition you into the head coach role, right? And that's actually the thing that gave me the courage to take the position, that even though I didn't think that I was like capable of it physically or mentally or emotionally or whatever you want to call it. Because Peter was going to be there, like kind of guiding me along. So for that year, he took as much flack as he possibly could on social media. He went on all of the like interviews and shows and whatever, and tried to make sure that I was just focusing on my job. He did all of the communication with upper management. He was always there, like picking me up and dusting me off and giving me feedback and whatever it was, or giving me the like support that I needed. And that's kind of, I think, why I was able to make a good transition into the head coach role. So yeah, like that's actually kind of the reason that I became a head coach at all, was because like I don't think I would have done it if I hadn't had Peter there to ease me into it.
Okay. No, I noticed already a pattern that you value so much to have the right people around you. I can definitely appreciate that. I think anyone, the earlier you come to that realization, the better, because it's always that conversation of the grass always looks greener elsewhere, but in the end, I know now, like looking back at my career, there are certain people that I work with that deserve to be cherished a lot more than they potentially were. And now as you progress, you know that those people that you've collected along the way, it's like I'm just trying to piece together a way where we reunite, in the next team that I'm going to be a part of. So it's definitely very relatable, and I think it's great to hear that this is something that you recognize so early on, to have people that you can trust around you to push you further. That's truly a blessing.
Definitely. I mean, I like to take after my dad a lot. My dad's kind of my hero in a lot of ways, and he likes to say that kind of at the end of your life, when you look back, the relationships in your life are the things that you actually treasure. Like those are the real valuable things that you accumulate over the course of your lifetime. It's like that's the thing that at the end of your life you look back on and you're either like regretful or you're happy about them. And I think that's true. And I think when it comes to working with people, especially, like if you can find people that are hardworking and smart and kind people, like good people, you should hold on to those people, because it's not that easy. It's not that easy to find. It's really not. And you should just hold on to them, and that's actually probably going to be much more important to your happiness and your success than like a lot of the other things. A lot of the greener grass things over the fence, that you're looking at and thinking like, wow, that looks nice. And my experience has definitely been that I've had a lot of players that have left Splyce or left Mad and looked back and like found out the grass wasn't greener. I've had so many players turn to me and be like, fuck, I miss Till. God, I miss having Till around. I miss having like things just being sorted. It's like I miss having someone that I could just go to with my problems and it's just fixed. It's just taken care of. And I think it's little things like that that actually make up your daily life experience that really matter.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. It's like I ran into a personal shock last year, like in my personal life, that really put everything into perspective. It's like every small problem all of a sudden looked so minuscule, and the main focus was more about enjoying whatever I'm going through. at the time, because I think it's very easy in a very competitive environment to always think about the next thing rather than being actively there and recognizing that we are in the process of creating memories that we will actually look back on, which is something that I've personally tried a lot more in the last couple of years to be a lot more mindful of, because it's like in the Vitality years for me, 2018, 2019, those are some of my best personal memories. And then when everything, while I was going through it, I did enjoy it, but I felt, maybe this was the good days, that I should be really grateful for, and I should have enjoyed it more in the moment.
Yeah, I understand. I often think that there's like, it's so easy to look at another team that's like higher up than you in the standings or whatever it is, and think that they have this like perfect environment and perfect land where everyone's happy, and there are no problems. And that's just such an insane self-delusion and facade. It's crazy, like I I often say this to players actually, that like happiness is not like a destination, like it's not this place that you arrive at where suddenly you get there and all your teammates are perfect human beings that don't make mistakes, and they don't have their own issues, and they never get angry, and they never tilt, and like they're all perfectly hardworking, and they all see the game that like this place doesn't exist. Forget this place. If you want to win, like you need to be able to deal with imperfection. You need to be able to deal with, frankly, taking on what you might consider to be an unfair burden and do things that you don't think that you should have to. But that's what greatness is. That's what winning and being competitive is. That's what it means to be a top tier competitor and to be one of the greats. It's like not focusing on this far off, distant place where like your problems are solved by someone else.
No, for sure. It's just you have to really, really build a form of internal resilience, because especially in a team game, there's so many things that can and will go wrong within a season, and who you are and what foundation you've built from the get-go is always going to be tested. You can't avoid not being tested, because one day someone's going to be sick, maybe a different day someone's going to go through some personal turmoil, maybe one day you're going to lose all the games on a weekend. It's like, how are you going to deal with those issues? Because everything is going to always accumulate up until that end point where you're going to be playing your final game of the season, and then everything is kind of just amounting to that moment, and of course that is the final test. But everything that you do in the day-to-day and the challenges that you face, in every hardship there's so much opportunity to grow, and always the process of convincing players to think that way is always an interesting one. And I think it's you can be the most, at least I feel the most proud when I feel like players are really buying into that and really living that idea. Definitely.
I think topically we had that experience this weekend actually. Like on Saturday and Sunday we played really poorly, and more than like drafting poorly and playing poorly, we just weren't ourselves, and that felt really bad, and everyone felt horrible. And our the best mindset that I could think of for us to have coming into the next day was like, this is an opportunity for us to show that we are mentally resilient. This is an opportunity for us to show that we can come in and on Saturday and Sunday and suck and play really poorly, like play way below our standard, and still come in on Monday with confidence and with decisiveness and with trust and feeling good and smile. And if you can do that, that's a big step towards being a really good team.
Agreed. No, 100%. I think, at least from my outside perspective, it felt, even though like maybe game one, I felt, looking at it from outside, I think there was the affiliation to the high midding a Kate. I thought that was on paper very difficult, but I think the main feeling I got from game 1 and 2 was that there was, at least from outside, that there was like a lack of confidence almost, there was something that didn't feel the same in regards to how I viewed Mad in the previous days. But then the game on the third day, it felt like, oh, you guys made really good adjustments. This looks like a very 13.4 draft with the Hylissang, with the Annie. It felt like the adjustments happened, and then the gameplay looked like a I want to say vintage Mad Lions game, but it's from Winter Split, so it's not that vintage. It sounds like it's some dusty thing. So,
well, you're exactly right though. Like all of us kind of came out of that game thinking like, yeah, that was like we played like ourselves. That was us. That's the Mad Lions that I remember that we are. We're still us. Good job, us.
No, that's good to hear. Did you go through the process of mapping out what that means to be like each individual's, like each player's role within that context of what it means to be Mad Lions? Is that something that's been mapped out, or is it more of like an intangible thing?
I think it's definitely intangible. I think it comes down to culture at the end of the day, right? Which is this like almost like this corporate jargon buzzword at this point, right? Like whenever you read any book about management or coaching or whatever, it's culture, 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 and lots of people have lots of different opinions on what culture is and how you build it and blah blah blah. And I've read a lot of those books and bought into a lot of those ideas as well. But I think for like if I boil it down to its like simplest possible component, I think the Mad Lions, like historically, if I think back to the moments where Mad Lions has been the best it's ever been, it's when we're having fun and it's when we're confident, and that's like the bottom line.
No, it's that portion is very, very intangible, because what that means for each individual player is so unique and so different. Yeah. So of course the environment needs to partially adjust to the needs of the group, because the values and the principles need to be defined together. From outside, I've always I've gotten the impression that and the environment that you build is very nurturing, and I see, based off of the players that I've worked in the past in regards to the previous split, I can see that Nisqy is been given in the last year too a real opportunity to grow out of this box that he was put in as a player. Just a player that supports his jungler and plays these roaming champs, and I was happy to see that expansion because it seems so intentional. I'm also happy to see Hilly, in the context of how he approaches the game, and how when Hilly plays well, I know that he has the support of the whole team and the buy-in of the team, and I saw many of those moments. So I was very, very happy to see this. So from outside, I can genuinely feel that you have built a nurturing environment. As the season begins, so you've signed all your players, the pre-season preparation, how do you approach that to get the buy-in from the players, and how do you set the kind of the expectations for a player joining a Mad Lions run by, of course, you and Till and the rest of the crew?
I mean, that kind of, it's something that has constantly been evolving from year to year. And I mean, I don't want to give an it depends answer, but it does depend a lot on the staff and players you have on the roster. I think this year we have like actually a very mature roster when it comes to like the players on this roster are, I'd say this is probably one of our oldest rosters in terms of average age that we've worked with in a while. That would be my guess if you added it all up. And it's also the roster with the biggest coaching staff on site. We've had a lot of remote coaches before, but on site now we have 4 coaches on site, which is pretty crazy. And then we have a Romain offsite and Aggie offsite as well. And then we have Jake, our performance manager, and then we have 2 managers and Till, and then content guys, right? So we actually have an insane number of staff for 5 players. So we outnumber them now, which means that it's much easier for me to have like a lot of direct control over the way that our culture operates through the staff, and then the players, it's easy for them to get caught up in it, No, on a serious note, though, I think this year, in terms of preseason, our big focus coming into it was making sure that the team like was happy together and actually like bonding together. We all got COVID in Madrid. We stayed in our gaming house in Madrid, so like a bunch of us got COVID. I was in quarantine in my bedroom in this house in Madrid eating like chicken soup for like days. I was dead. I had like a horrible fever for 3. It was rough. It was rough, but we actually, I mean, it's not been a secret that our scrims have been pretty rough, and that was from boot camp as well. Like, I don't think we won a single scrim block in boot camp.
Yeah.
But we actually, I think, did a good job of counterbalancing that with having so much, like finding ways to have fun together as a team and getting people involved in things. And we spend a lot of time trying to think about what are the activities that are going to draw people out of their shells? What are the activities that people are going to be comfortable with? What are the who are the individuals in the team that are going to kind of lead the energy and the morale of the group? And what are the things that are going to speak to them? And what do they bring to the group? I think one example of silly example of this that comes to my head is Yoya started actually bringing a speaker with us to the LEC and blasting music.
I heard the reggaeton actually from the green room.
Yeah, the reggaeton. And that actually did a lot to transform the way that our pregame was and make sure that people were relaxed and having fun and things like this. So trying to kind of bring out these small things that allow people to kind of have agency over the group dynamic and express themselves and have fun, I think is our big focus. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can get people out of their shells and get them having fun.
Okay. Interesting. I'm curious. I always have this great challenge in Berlin to figure out activities that you can actively do. What are some activities that you guys have done? I'm going to steal some of your ideas here.
Okay. I mean, from a performance perspective, some of the best things that you can do for group bonding in human beings physiologically or psychologically, whatever you want to call it, is getting them getting their heart racing, getting them into high states of what you'd call arousal, right? So high emotional states, whether that's fear or stress or anxiety or joy, jubilation, these things that really get your heart pounding and make your heart swell. These types of feelings are incredible for human bonding. It doesn't have to be stuff like that, but things like going paintballing is one of them, because there's a lot of fear and there's a pain response and there's a camaraderie type thing, or doing we didn't end up being able to do it in the end because it got cancelled because it was snowing in Madrid when we were there. We were going to do a treetop climb.
That's the thing.
Yeah, awful. It's first time in
unlucky
forever.
Spain trip ever. It was snowing. You guys got COVID. It was a whole mess.
It was a good start to the year.
Oh man.
Doing a treetop type climb thing, where you go from climbing across ropes and stuff like that from tree to tree and things like that, being high up, anything that really gets people going. We do escape rooms with them sometimes. Sometimes it's tame stuff that, all the guys have gotten really into chess recently because all the staff have been playing chess, and then Niski started playing chess, and then all the other players started playing chess. So chess has been a big part of the meta recently, which has been pretty fun. And anything that we can provide them with that is gonna organically help them to enjoy their time together is, I think, a positive thing for us.
I think even on a neurological level, to activate your mind to deal with different problems can be so helpful when you're batting your head towards the same thing. It's so easy when you're playing the same game over and over that it becomes mundane and borderline automatic. I think it's so important to engage yourself in different ways, and at the same time to hit two nails on the head to engage yourself together with someone else is so good. A classic one that I always do with my players is I give each player basically a geometric surreal drawing, and then the other person needs to explain the drawing to the other person, and he needs to draw this drawing, and it always looks so damn ridiculous. And it's always fun to see how pro players are engaged in that issue. And then usually I do some award ceremony where next person gets to choose the team dinner if we go 3-0 on the weekend or something like this, something silly just to get them engaged. This is also one that I really like doing. But paintball is a good idea. Especially after a rough weekend, I can also jump in and maybe shoot some bullets at the guys that are annoying me just a little bit.
Things like that are great. Great. I'm a big believer in some of the things that you mentioned. I think there's a big part of human culture that is based on ritual. So things like being able to decide the next team dinner, or things like having a little award ceremony. We did cold exposure. That's one of the other things that we like to do with the players. All jump into a freezing cold swimming pool, or we filled a bunch of wheelie bins up with freezing water and put ice in them, and saw how long we could stay in them together, and then danced around outside in the cold air like lunatics. And then came inside and like cooked some food together, ate together around a fire, like and like tried to open up and get some people to like actually share what they wanted to achieve this year, where they were coming from, like a bit of their story. A lot of the more, I want to call it like tribal or primal like elements of human nature that really help you kind of bond with each other, things like that, and then have like a kind of, we had a like little closing ceremony for the end of the boot camp, and I think those types of things are also psychologically really, really good to get people to like bond with each other.
Yes. No, it's just the element of it's like being in a team game. It's not about it is about doing your best, but what that best looks like in the context of making the team achieve its best can always be so different, because context always matters depending on who you're working with, because dynamics always change, and the only way to possibly do that is to actively engage, go through things together and learn more about each other. And I'm so happy that that this is something that you guys share. The whole ice bath into a fireplace. I just could imagine the experience in my mind. That sounds really, really amazing. I'm a big cold exposure guy. Like when we were in Iceland.
Oh, I love it.
We just went 0-3. We had a really tough Worlds 2021, and then we went to the I think Sky Lagoon is a place. And I asked the guy, I was like, what is the record for the ice bath? He's like, yeah, I think like 22 minutes something. I was like, okay, I need a win in my life. I'm going to go 30 minutes. It's like, okay, just let me know if you're dying so I can save you. I was like, no problem. You'll see me like, closing my eyes or some shit.
Man, we only managed 15 and one of our coaching staff members almost got hypothermia.
I think the trick is to not move. If you move, it gets worse.
I sit there like tucking my hands into my armpits, so that my fingers don't fall off.
No, I was just like, I was an egg, It's like, but at some point, it's like, it's no longer cold, it's just kind of pain,
Yes.
I had like this pain in my bones that was just getting deeper and deeper, and then at some point I was like, okay, 30 minutes, I won something this weekend, so I was satisfied. Just felt the need to get a win, but probably a very stupid way to get a win.
No, yeah, I love cold exposure as well. We when we went to Iceland for MSI that year, we all jumped in the sea together. All the coaching staff members went and jumped in the sea in like whenever it was. I don't know, April. Yeah, it must have been April.
How cold was it? I need to imagine how cool it was.
I think it was like 2 or 3 degrees outside.
Oh shit.
That was intense. That was like I'm used to cold exposure where the pain comes on eventually, but this was like instant pain. Like 10 seconds in, it was like shooting pain. It was horrible. Horrible, yeah.
No, I can imagine. In the context of so I want to take a little bit of a step back. The 2021 season, back-to-back champions. What was the main thing you feel that could define the major edge you had over the other teams in this season, if you look back?
To be honest, I think our biggest edge was Humanoid. I think he had a monster season that year. And I think that's a very simplified answer, but I think the more complex answer is that we had a group of people that facilitated getting the absolute best out of Marek, because he's a very unique person.
Yes.
And he has this like bad boy kind of stone cold killer image, which he is, but there's also another Marek that's like a very different person, and I think we managed to get the best out of him is the short answer. Like, we managed to create an environment where Marek could be himself and got the best out of it, and had like a really good team environment and had a lot of fun together and had full trust in each other. And in that environment, he really kind of took over when it came to like the games. I remember there's a specific game that I remember. I can't even remember when it was, but it was like a really high stakes game, like playoffs or worlds or whatever, where we get Baron and we're in a really like we're in a kind of position to win the game. And, like in those positions, like, I don't know about you, but personally for me, the positions when we're losing, the positions when it's even, like those are fine. But the positions when we're about to win, when we have the lead and it's like one more step and we close the game, that's when my heart is at like 300 BPM, and I often feel like that's when the most stress comes out in the comms, and I remember a moment where Yo-Yo just goes, "Everyone shut up and listen to Marek." And like Marek was just the only one that talked for like the Baron sequence and the push. And that's honestly how mad 2021 was. Like we had like our comms were crazy cluttered. Like it was pure chaos all the time. Like everyone is just talking all the time. But when Marek talked, people shut up and listened.
No, in our case, so the context, so now when we acquired Humanoid, naturally, it's like we lost against you guys in the final and we pursued them heavily. I think in the context of what was going on with us, I think at least my read on it is, I think individually, Marek is one of the best players that I've ever worked with. Like, I think in terms of like lane phase and game understanding, like he educated me on some serious shit, It's like,
me too.
It's like he came into the team and it's like, you guys fucking sucked last year and this is what you were missing. And then I was like, oh, it all just fucking clicked, It was like eye-opening. And I think a big issue for us was, I think when the effort that he put in didn't feel rewarding to him, and he couldn't like that level of there needs to be a certain level of resilience and kind of thick-skinnedness to Marek's approach, and you need to really absorb what he's sharing with you, because at some point, if he feels, at least in our year, my read was that when he didn't feel like it was rewarding, then he would care less and it would only kind of show up in the stage games. So our practice was always in this tumultuous position where jungle and support made a couple of mistakes. Marek elaborated on what needs to be done. It wasn't fixed, and then it was just kind of a vicious cycle of this happening. And I've began to appreciate more and more when the most important element of practice when it comes to performance and scrims is just how consistent your jungler can be, because it's so defining for the rest of the game. It's like if your top laner dies once, that's okay, we figured it out. Enemy Jace is 2-0, but it's like we can play the game. If jungle fucks up something, it's like he dies on an invade, and this game is just whole completely over. So you need to have that really, really strength about yourself, and that the discipline about yourself when you're playing the jungle position to really allow your team to get the most out of practice. And I think the contrast is, for me now, when I worked with Razork and Humanoid, Razork is a very emotional player. He needs to feel, he needs to be nurtured by his peers to really, really perform well in a game. And I think Humanoid is kind of the opposite in terms of the player that he is. He's not going to try to nurture your teammate into that state where he's going to feel really good in game. This is not the element. He has a bar and a standard that he's going to try to help you achieve that. And if not, you're on your own in some shape or form. That was like my experience in of course 2022 with Humanoid. But on an individual basis, like if you have the right pieces around the player like Humanoid, he wins your championship. So for sure, I'm happy that the simple answer was, of course, Humanoid. He was telling me the stories about how he could bring up these LPL games and just, this is what we need to do, this is what we have to figure out, and he seemed so overjoyed by the fact that he got positive feedback and response from that, because people actually listened, And I think, so I can understand that that's like the main difference maker, because we started so slow in spring, and we fell so far behind due to how we were dealing, where one of the players was having some personal problems and we were trying to deal with it, and we're kind of just patching things up. But the wounds became a little bit too deep coming into summer, because whenever there was progress, whenever there was like a drop down, because performance fluctuates, of course, and whenever there was a drop down, the drop down was so steep, because the thoughts of, this roster doesn't make sense, this roster is just terrible, why are we doing this? Why should I waste my energy? That drop was always so heavy for us.
Yeah. And it's like Marek has taught me more than any other player about the game, and like he and I have both challenged each other a lot, and like had a lot of kind of disagreements, and well, this team does this and this team does this, and like kind of butting heads about these types of things. But I respect his opinion so much, and we taught. I mean, he taught me a lot. I'd like to think that I taught him some things, but probably not as much as he taught me, frankly. But I mean, I think what you're kind of mentioning there with regards to him is that he can be quite a pessimistic person. You know, he's certainly not a glass half full kind of guy.
Yes.
And I think that paired with like a very direct feedback style sometimes makes it really hard with players. And I think, you know, Hilly, I think, is one of these players as well that really needs to feel nurtured and trusted and comfortable and confident, and he struggles to feel that way with this type of feedback style. And I can see why that was an issue as well. And on Mad 2021, like what we had was like, I remember we had like kind of one early game laning phase. Like Marek is usually F-keying when he's in scrims or when he's in competitive game to look at other lanes. That's one of the things I think that differentiates him from a lot of players, is how good he is with F-keys and how perceptive he is about what else is going on in the map. Like in our team, at least, he was usually the one calling, like, I'm going to dive top wave here. I mean, Armut got really, really good at it, but like he could do it without being told a lot of the time that like I need to drop a wave mid and go top here because he's F-keying the top laner and looking at his wave, and he can like look at top lane for 0.25 seconds and see what's going on, which was always mind-blowing to me. And he would be doing this in scrims and he'd notice people's mistakes. And I remember we had this scrim game where he turns around to Armut at the beginning of the review and is like put the review at like 2 minutes 32, and then is like, this last hit is bad, this is bad, like this needs to change, you need to do this you need to change, now your wave is fucked, now you crashed at a bad time, now this happens, like, and this, and like explains like the whole snowball of why top lane went poorly in this game, like every single auto attack, like frame by frame, perfectly somehow to Armut. And I think so many players would be so uncomfortable with that, and it was like a kind of like tense moment in the team. You know, people are thinking like, how's this guy going to respond? And Armut just turns around and goes like, explain it again. Like that's so uncommon, and I think we had that a lot with Marek. Elyoya was the same. Elyoya just wanted to be like a sponge and just soak up all of the knowledge he possibly could from Marek. So he had a lot of kind of like outlets, and he had a lot of like people who were very willing to be a receptacle in that sense for all of the information that he was giving out and all the feedback he was giving out. And I think that's what made our environment so special, and that's what made us like have so much trust at the end of the day, right? The environment we had, and like how open we were about the feedback that we were giving each other, and how direct it could be and still be okay, meant that like the players really saw the game in the same way. They had a lot of trust for each other. We also had like great team fighting. I think our team fighting set us apart from the league in a lot of ways. We won a lot of games that we shouldn't have won just off of like better team fighting. But when you look at the situations where we're like really, really, really far down, you're like 10k gold down, and like the reverse sweep against Rogue in spring playoffs, or I think there was a game against you guys that we almost
lost
won
when we had Vayne and you guys had the GP. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Like those games, I think the whole culture we had around giving feedback, around trusting each other, around the way that Marek was communicating with people and teaching people, around having fun in these situations, around smiling, like all of these things kind of, and the good team fighting, like all of these things kind of linked together to make us just feel like invincible in game. Actually, like we never felt like we were out of a game. Like even if we were 10k down, we always felt like we could do something because we trusted each other so much.
Now, what you're sharing about Humanoid makes perfect sense. It's like the whole approach of mine in 2022 was, how can I create a circumstance where the knowledge ceiling of Marek is something that applies to the whole team. On stage, it's like we played very good games on stage because the effort of everyone was basically unquestionable, while in practice, the sign or the hint of something bad, it would just scatter down. It would become very like tense always. It would be like the luggage of not believing that these issues can be fixed was always kind of straining the practice through the year, after we had a very tough spring split with a terrible start, and everyone was kind of put in boxes. I think when like looking at the current Fnatic, it's like they have Humanoid on contract, and I think with the right players, he can be easily the best mid laner in Europe in terms of who he is. But he needs to have exactly the type of players that you mentioned. They need to be able to take direct feedback. In that moment when he's giving you feedback, if you give bullshit points and he can see through it, and it feels to him like he just wasted his energy and time, he's gonna slowly lose faith in you, and it goes down a very, very bad path. And I hope now that even though Fnatic is going through such a tough time, it's like the context of where you place your players is so damn important, because it would be very disappointing to me if all of a sudden people don't value a player like Humanoid due to the current circumstance of Fnatic.
Yeah. Team is more than just a sum of its parts. And I mean, it's funny with Marek because it links back to something that I was saying earlier, which is that actually, like, he really doesn't enjoy doing this. He doesn't like doing all the shot calling. He doesn't like giving people feedback. He doesn't really enjoy like all of these things that he does to make the team better, but he does it because he wants to win. And like that's exactly what I was saying earlier, you know, like sometimes to win you have to take on an unfair burden of things that you shouldn't have to do, but you do them because you want to win, hopefully more than anyone else. You know, that's the ideal, and you're willing to put the work in for it. So that, like what you were saying about if that feedback isn't received properly, if someone makes a bullshit comment, if someone makes an excuse, if someone like makes it personal, then the fact, like, you know, if you were enjoying doing those things and you're trying to get through to someone and whatever, like I enjoy doing those things, right? So it's no biggie to me if someone like ends up getting a bit emotional or a bit tilted or ends up being a bit silly or doesn't take the feedback well. It just means I need to find a better way, you know. But Marek actively dislikes doing this. So if someone does this, he's like, why the fuck am I doing this? You know, like what's the point?
Yeah, no, for sure. It was always like a negotiation. I was like, Marek, when you talk to your teammates, when you're active in review, it's so positive. This is, if you can be the difference maker, what can we do, you know? And then I tried to say, you know, this is a player, he reacts to this positively. If you talk to him like this, he's going to react like this. And then I see how he's looking at me. He's like, why the fuck do I need to do any of this? Why can't they just fucking play good? Why can't they just fucking learn the game, you know?
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with him in 2020 where he really opened up about how he felt about something, and the team responded to it so differently. And I remember talking to him about the value of telling your teammates how you feel and saying, like, here, like, look at this example before where you said, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And this example where you said, I feel like I don't have enough information to play the game here. I feel like I need more. I feel like I need this. I feel like, you know, making it personal, making it like non-accusatory and stuff like this. And I remember him turning around to me and being like, so wait, I just say what I'm thinking anyway, and I put I feel on the front? That's bullshit.
It's a difference maker. It's a difference between saying it's factually a fact or it's your impression. It's a huge difference maker.
Yeah. I mean, the difference between I don't know, you never put any wards down, or you never track the enemy jungler properly, and I feel like I'm playing the game with not enough information. I feel like I don't know where the enemy jungler is. There's a big difference. There's a big difference.
Yeah, it's like the response to the I feel thing is like, oh, why does he have that impression? Or it's so different from, oh, he believes that to be true, I have to prove him wrong. It becomes a very different kind of response, just purely from a psychological standpoint, unless you are aware of it, which is, from the coach's perspective, we just pay attention. Most of the time when they are screaming, we just pay attention, so we see the patterns. Like at some point, like I can see if someone's tilted from their neck, you know. It's like you can just notice, you know, what they're going through with these small cues, and it goes such a long way if players actually take the time to also deploy the same type of strategies that we're always working with. Like if they find ways to become closer to their teammates, it goes such a long way in terms of getting the most out of your team. I was talking to Romain as well, and it's like they were encouraging basically their players to just have one-to-one meetings. And whenever I see players talking about the game together, just strictly from the point of view of just doing it because they care and they want to be engaged with the game. I was like, okay, we are going to the moon. This is progress. We are moving in the right direction. We're going to smurf it. I think the best example from my career is just Upset and Hilly, the effort they put together to make sure that they play well. It's like after scrims, they're reviewing for hours. Every scrim, they're reviewing, they're duo queuing, and just dropping games and not qualifying to Masters. At the time, there was no like MMR block, so they could just play. And they just engage with each other about every small detail. Sometimes they were yelling at each other. Sometimes they were very cute with each other. It's like nurturing any type of relationship is so important in a team environment because you have a goal, right? It's so similar to being in a relationship with your significant other because you need to nurture it the same way through communication and actively really being aware of your values and principle and appreciate where they align and just trust that the other party wants to move in the same direction as you, and through that, of course, grow. I'm so happy that from the context of what I saw from the outside, and always after a season, I take the time to like reflect and say, oh, what went wrong? Of course, it happens in season 2, but just reflecting on each individual, just taking time to meditate on what went wrong and what players actually need. And it's funny to hear that this is exactly the context of how Mad Lions, when you guys were winning back-to-back titles, that everyone was just really bought into the idea of letting Marek lead the charge in some shape or form.
Definitely. It's funny you mentioned Hilly and kind of being nurturing because I completely agree with you on that. That's one of the things that I love the most about working with Hilly. Like there are literally days where we're like I'm like dragging Hilly away from his PC because I'm like, come on man, it's like time to review, and he's like, let me like look at this like trade. I messed up this trade, like he's amazing like that, and he puts so much effort in. Not just like on an in-game level, like, kind of reviewing every single game with Kazi and telling Kazi, like, you should be resetting here, or you should be trading here, or we should be walking up together here, whatever it is, like these small details. But also, one of the things that I've been so proud of our players with this year is how they've taken Chasy under their wing. And I think Hilly was like definitely initially leading the charge on that. I think Yoya has also done an incredible job. Like he and Chasy are very, very close. Yoya's like permanently playing top lane 1v1s with Chasy and reviewing his laning phase with him at the beginning. Like Chasy's English has gotten incredibly good, incredibly quickly. He's very, very smart boy. But initially Hilly was literally like permanently looking after Chasy. Chasy, come here, come sit with us. Chasy, come here, make sure, like, do you understand this? I'll explain it to you. Chasy, do you have everything you need? Chasy, do you know what you need for today's photo shoot? Like, did you understand the message properly? Like, all of this stuff. Like, he's so good at taking care of people and at noticing what they need and how they feel. I think he's such a wonderful teammate in that regard.
No, Hilly is so special. I think I've noticed whenever he feels like the best source of power that Hilly can draw from is when he cares about his teammates. If that level of connection is not there, Hilly is just not the same player. And when he feels like he's fighting for the individuals in the team, when he's playing, he becomes a whole different player. Like I remember, like when we played the best of 5 against G2 and we 3-2'd them. It's like he said, I don't remember the specific words, but I'm paraphrasing. It's like, Upset is going to go to Worlds. I'm going to fucking take it to Worlds. And he said it with such intensity. It was like, fucking, you can put that in some AI generator, and make it a whole anime show about this moment, So everyone who's going to watch that shit is going to get goosebumps because I did. And the way he played, he performed on a whole, I didn't see, he was so free flow. He was so deep in the head of Reckless and Mickey. I've never seen that level of performance and level of confidence and fluidity, just because of that connection he had to what Upset wanted to achieve. And in the year ahead of time, that level of connection between Hilly and Humanoid, that was like a relationship that didn't work too well. Right? Both of them super strong players, but often they were butting heads about things. And I'm so happy to see Hilly having success in Mad Lions, and that's why I could kind of imagine how you're working and how when I see Hilly playing well, I know that the environment is nurturing. That's why I started my question from before exactly like that. I'm happy to hear that Hilly is a lot more engaged in the process of like actually taking like the first step in connecting with his teammates, because I think that's something that I always wish that he did more. You know, that he had the confidence to be the veteran that he actually is, to have more trust in the experience he has had as a player, and recognize the impact that he can have as a player. Because the review and the mechanics and the level of play into bottom side, this has always been his massive strength. But the impact he can have on others, I think, was something that I always wished for more when it came to Hilly. Because I think in the past he was always working with someone that would actually actively always engage with him and take care of him. I think Hilly Buepo, Hilly Upset, these were relationships that were very, very powerful and helpful for Hilly. So I'm very happy to hear that he is, taking that charge at your current team.
Yeah, I mean those things you mentioned are actually two of the things that really surprised me with Hilly. One, like that he initially was very very quiet and not so forthcoming, but like as soon as he got comfortable with people and as soon as he was given that like positive feedback and that like well done for looking after Chasy, or like the encouragement that he needed, and kind of as soon as he felt like welcomed and comfortable with people, I think he opened up so much, and like he started smiling all the time and making jokes all the time and like looking after people all the time and like making these little like silly comments and like flaming people for fun, things that he wasn't doing before. Like it was really a joy to see him opening up. And I was also really surprised actually, like how much of the because when I interviewed Hilly, like obviously our like common frame of reference is our experience with Marek, and that's like a really easy framework for me to dissect with him, to think about like if I have a conversation with Hilly about his relationship with Marek, I can very easily figure out like what kind of teammate he is, what kind of environment he likes. Like you can tell a lot about him from that because I know Marek very well. So it was actually one of the first things we spoke about. And I was really surprised at how many concepts he brought from Marek, like into Mad Lions. Like a lot of the things that Marek believes about how to play the mid game, Hilly is like really aggressive about them. Like this is the correct thing to do for sure.
Yeah. No.
So yeah, those both surprised me.
No, that's cool. That's cool. And I think that the most frustrating thing was when we were making progress and we were moving forward and we were improving, I could not convince Marek that that's happening. Because the moment something went wrong, it was just proof that nothing is working, So it's always that cycle. It's like, oh, look, we're doing good. We look at the stage game. We're reviewing it. We're looking at it. We're like, oh, look how look at these concepts that are playing out on stage and how everyone's engaged with it. Look, we're basing quickly. The enemy team we just put down awards. We base. We defend bottom side. We fuck up the enemy tempo. Look at this, Marek. So yeah. And then scrim comes, some shit goes wrong, and it's like, oh, everything come back. Oh, okay, we start over. The vicious cycle. Yeah, it's important to feel like you can fuck up. I think that's important to be able to feel that way. I'm curious now. It's kind of a segue, but I am very curious about the finals against G2. So I spoke, with Hilly, and I can imagine how the pressure of facing a team that is so different and putting yourself in a position where you begin to question what you need to do. So you try to figure out like a new way of approaching the game, and then you're overreaching, and then you're like making maybe uncharacteristic mistakes. But I want to kind of hear your take. What are some of the takeaways from your side after the G2 best of 5? So let's say if we have a time capsule and I say, oh, you're playing a final again against G2, what are some of the learnings that you're going to be able to deploy now coming into the next best of 5? Or maybe just put into the theory of what you do in your practice?
I think the big two that we spoke about as a team afterwards, like first things first, for like performance on the final day, I think it was a rough day for us in terms of our like how we showed up on the day, which was really disappointing for us, because honestly we all came into that day believing we were going to win, which I mean you have to, right? But like genuinely believing it and feeling good about the matchup, like I still think that G2 is perfectly beatable for us. But the things that we highlighted that we needed to to do earlier, I guess, or do more work on coming into this year was, number one, we needed to be more kind of adaptable. Like I felt like we didn't have answers in the draft for some of the things that they had. And like in the last week, we had done a lot to be more creative and more flexible. Like, you know, we had picked up like the Gragas mid and stuff like this, right? But G2 kind of took it one step further. And not every team can do that because like players tend to be more specialized than generalists. And G2 has a lot of generalists on the team, which is not something that you can just replicate just because you want to, you know? It's something that like, frankly, not everyone can do, and like that's okay. You don't have to have 5 generalists on your team to win. You can win with like players with smaller effective champion pools. That's not an issue. But we felt like we could have done more earlier on in the split to, like, you know, you don't need to have like 8 champions ready on the day, but and for us it would be like, how to put this, I don't want our players to have like, I don't want to like try and copy G2 purely and say like we need to have 10 champions ready on the day and then all the champions be like a 7 out of 10, you know. But I want us to be actively thinking about how to proactively innovate in the meta rather than copying what other people are doing. Like using data, using stats, using our own initiative, playing 1v1s, like talking to one tricks, all the like extra things that we can do to figure out which champions and which matchups are good, and then over the course of the split have 2 or 3 or 4 of those champions like that we add into our pools that we get to like being a 9 out of 10 on, you know, like Niski's Gragas would be the best example. Like I want 4 more Niski Gragases in my team of like, oh shit, you gave Niski Gragas, like those types of champions. I think best example of that was Fnatic 2018, where you have like, oh shit, you gave Broxley Sin, and then like, oh, but you gave Hilly Pike. Oh, you gave Hilly Rakan. Oh, you gave Reckless Tristana. You gave Reckless Civet. Well, like, you gave Nemesis TF. Well, you can't ban them all, you know? And like, I think that's the thing that I wanted. That's the big takeaway for me, like the first one for our team, that I wanted us to be more proactive about innovation and develop more mastery over a more diverse set of champions. The second one was that I wanted us to be more mentally resilient, because I think after game 2 we got really beat down mentally, and like game 3 we had like a huge lead and we lost the game, and I think that's like the tiredness factor, but also the mental factor. So I think those are the 2 big things to take away for us.
Okay, interesting. I wanted to elaborate on just your takes on the format, because I imagine everything must have changed in terms of the preparation. My impression is that the weeks that you prepare before the regular split starts are a lot more essential. There's no patches that are going to save you. Momentum is very important to get the most out of your stage matches. What was your general take on the format? How do you feel about it? How do you guys approach it? Has anything changed for you, of course, with the format changes?
Yeah, I'd say a lot has changed. I mean, I generally like the format. I think it's very hard from a burnout perspective. Like, it's hard on me personally, for sure. Like, I'm definitely feeling it right now. Like, if I compare how I'm feeling now to how I was feeling at this date last year in the split, for sure I'm feeling much more burnt out now than I was then. But we've also like played 3 BO5s and 3 BO3s and been to a final, right? So I think the benefit of that is that we get to stress test our team at an earlier point. We get to stress test our players at an earlier point. Like at this point last year, would we be playing playoffs by now? We probably would, right? Yeah, we'd start late January, then we'd have 8 weeks. Yeah, we'd be playing playoffs around now. Like I still wouldn't know what Chasy looks like in a best of series, for example, at this point. I wouldn't know how he is. And that is, I think, really, really important information that I would rather have earlier, so that I can then adapt to getting him to, like, you know, let's say he's really nervous in his first best of 5, or he doesn't adapt well between the drafts, or he's like, we're not on the same page about how we, like, you know, I don't know, we lost 2 games to this champion, we should like consider taking it out. Like there are some players who believe you should, and some players who believe you should like stick to your guns, right?
Yes.
And like being on the same page about those types of things earlier and having more time to be able to troubleshoot those issues, I think that's a really, really big positive. And I think for me, that's the thing that's gonna like level up the league over time, is just having more best of experience and having more ability to adapt. I personally feel that like adaptability is one of the most important, if not the most important characteristic for a League of Legends pro player, outside of like confidence, for example. Like a lot of the like kind of intangible or the mental qualities right, but I think adaptability in terms of your willingness to adapt, your ability to bounce back from mistakes, your ability to be creative, your ability to change strategies, your ability to pick up new champions, to like adapt to different drafts, adapt to different metas, adapt to different play styles. Like all of these things for me come under adaptability. So being able to test that and train that earlier on is a big plus for me.
No, that's very fair. I think that's a good way of putting it. Adaptability is key on so many levels, also within game, right? Sometimes the enemy AD or the enemy mid gets 3-0 or you get 3-0. All of a sudden, the dynamic of the whole game changes because if everything is so pattern driven in terms of how you play, then whenever anyone's going to disrupt that, you're going to be in danger. And it's also important to always be able to keep up and be in tune with what the state of the game is and make decisions based off of that, not based off of what you believe the pattern should be. There's like a balance in between. And I think on the outside portion of it too, for sure. I was happy. I was talking to Romain, and he was saying how there's such a big buy-in in terms of what their analyst is bringing to the table. And he has so much more data that is, of course, something that analysts are there for, right? They're supposed to leverage the amount of information they have, and players are often acting off of their anecdotal data. It's like, oh, Showmaker's playing this, I should play this, or this is something that I saw in solo queue. It's very, very limited and a very narrow perspective than what you can gain from working, of course, with the information that is available to you. You mentioned before that you have a massive staff. How is that aspect of things ran? Do the players do they buy in? They say, oh, there's this champion. Oh, look, Jarvan is doing well right now in jungle. We should just slam it because it is broken. Or how did that process coming into, for example, week 1 go? Because you had limited scrim time, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, week 1, I think the mistake we made in week 1 was we were like actually too broad. Like we came in and we were like, right, we're gonna like flex this champion and flex this champion and flex this champion. We had like too many ideas and we didn't refine enough like close to the weekend. So we ended up, like I said, having a bunch of 7 out of 10s rather than like some 9 out of 10s, you know? And that's kind of the story of this week for me. And so overall, when it comes to the stuff, I think we're still getting that process right, you know. I think when it comes to buy-in is something that you have to continually earn, you know. And like, frankly, I don't expect to be able to go to my players and be like, "This champion's super broken right now. You should pick it," and them to be like, "Yeah, okay," you know. Like that's not how it works. Like at least in my experience with like the kind of top players and the LEC players in general, I think these types of things work much better in ERLs where players are like, sure, I trust the coach. What do I know? You know? But more often than not in LEC, I think you need to come really armed with a lot of data and a lot of like evidence about why we should be playing this champion. Until you get like, once you get like 3 home runs with that, then great. Like I remember last year, Pad had this with Niski because Pad was responsible for mid lane positional coaching last year. This year at Zeph, but Pad had like literally was like fighting Niski to the death for like 2 weeks to get him to play Lissandra. You know, before Lissandra was meta, and RNG was like the only team playing it, and Pad's like showing him like, this is how you play your first base. This is how strong you are on your first recall. This is how strong you are at level 6. This is how Xiaohu is using it. This is what he's doing in team fights. Look how impactful he is. And eventually he won Niski over.
Yes.
And after like 2 or 3 or 4 of those, then Niski is like, as soon as Pad suggests something, he's much more open-minded to it now, you know, because he's been won over and he has that buy-in and that trust. But it's certainly not instantaneous, and it's like it's a person-by-person thing. And I think like all coaches and players have their own like biases, you know, like they all have champions that you love. Like I'm sure you have this as a coach as well. Like you have this champion that like your team was like unbeaten on and unbeatable on in 2018, and the champion comes back into your meta and you're like so excited, like yes, we're going to pick this champion, it's going to be super broken. And then like, well, some things have changed since 2018 and you've got a new top laner now, so like it doesn't quite work the same way, you know. Like you can't blind pick Vizicachi Gangplank every game and just expect to win, you know.
No, I see. No, definitely there's like a process of I don't know how to define it, but I can definitely relate to the process of sometimes you let the players make a mistake just so you're not going to fight them on it, just because it's going to kind of develop or allow you to have some kind of credit. Like my most recent example was the whole scrim week, we're banning GP, and we're going to play Vitality on the weekend with Alfari. And then we comment. We did this thing where we have the draft meetings in the morning online, and then we meet at the office late because we always had the later games. And then the draft meeting was set, everything was set, and then it's like we're doing our like stretches before the match, and then it's like, why are we banning GP? He's not even good GP. I'm like, where is this coming from? It's like, well, no, I don't think we should ban GP. Wunder, you can play against GP, right? It's like, yeah, I can play against GP. I played against GP a lot. I can play against GP, no problem. It's like, yeah, we can pick good champions that are good into GP. And it's like the whole thought was in my brain is like, yo, guys, the whole week we decided to ban GP. We're very bad at defending the dive on the stacked wave against GP. This is where we lose when we're playing like the Kale counter and so forth. So this is not something that we're really good at. There's like 5 players saying, no, let's open GP. We can play against it. And then the game is played. And then it's like, we get dove top. Our jungler dies, our top laner dies, and they're like, I just fucked up my auto. If I played it good, then we would have won. But I know in that moment, I'll tank that best of one, because the next time we're gonna have a conversation like this, they will know. Sometimes there's it's like a game that you're playing where you're collective, like I'm gonna spend some points here to invest in this idea that I had, and then if it goes bad, then it's terrible, or if it goes good, you get a return there. There's definitely like a level of negotiation that is kind of hard to define, but it's very relatable what you shared in terms of like building that credibility and that buy-in.
It's 100%. Like investing in higher level tech in Age of Empires,
Yes.
Like now we've leveled up. Now we can progress to the next level.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you highlighted two of my like least favorite like sentences in draft meetings there. The why are we banning this? Like you've put this ban in the draft, and like you open the draft sheet, and the first thing like someone says, why are we banning that champion? Like I don't like your mid laner, for example, is like, I don't want to ban any mid laners. Like, you think I need a mid lane ban against this guy? Like I can do it. And then but the other one is I can. That's a great one. Like I know you can play against this champion. Like I know it's possible. Is it good? Like, is this the best idea we have? I could do it.
That's the number one like convincing strategy players deploy. They ask a teammate, "Can you play against this champion?" "Yeah, I can." "Oh, see." It's so often.
Who says no there? Like who is going to say no?
It's such a it's a funny process.
It's a false friend. It's a real false friend, that question.
For sure. It's like in Fnatic, every draft meeting, I recognized there was this pattern. It's like I would sit up at night, I would figure out the whole thing, everything would be set in stone. And then I would come to the meeting, I would present it to the boys, this is what we're doing today, this is what we practice, this is what we're doing this, and I would present it. And for the first 10 minutes, everyone would just like say random shit. No, we should do this, we should do this. And then after 10 minutes, I say, guys, I have an idea, let's do this. And I present the same idea, it was like, wow, this is so good, let's do this. Every draft meeting played out like this, every time.
I think you have to get the in out, like you have to like take all like see where the path leads, and then realize that it like you have to walk down the path until you see that it falls off a cliff, and then you're like, well, I guess the other part does look better.
Yeah. No, it's definitely like draft is like an expanding tree. You start with no bans, and it's like, if that plays out, then I have to ban this, and it's like everything just. It's crazy how much is dependent on just first pick and 1-2. It's like 90% of the draft conversation is just that. Then maybe you're just 4-5 bans here and there, but the majority of just what are we first picking, what is happening 1-2, and that's like the main part of the conversation. No, it's fun. Yeah.
The absolute worst days for draft are when 90% of the conversation is on the nightmare scenario.
Yes.
What if we like pick our secret pick that no one knows about, and they ban that and our other champion that they also don't know about in second round? What if they do the 3 perfect bans for us that they've never done before and no one has ever done in the first round, and they ban away all the champions that we're thinking of picking? Like those scenarios are I hate them so much. I hate them so much.
For sure. But I personally can't let myself not be ready. There's so many, I think so many times where I go on stage and it's like, these guys had no fucking clue at all. I just fucking have to laugh to myself on stage, you know? So we just wasted hours.
You always prep the nightmare, but the nightmare prep is almost always a waste of time. Especially because the nightmare usually can't do much about the nightmare, you know? Like, all teams have crutches, and if you take away enough crutches, then, like, the team can't, like, perform at their best. That's normal.
Yes,
but,
yes.
like, so you can't do anything about it anyway.
No, agreed. That's interesting. I wonder how some of these conversations are evolving around, like the big meme now with G2 is, of course, Draven, but there's some level of relatability with what Excel did, for example. It's like, someone just first picked Draven and they got Gragas Aphelios into it. I thought that was like partially acceptable at some point. You know, if you play against G2, it's not like banning Draven is going to make you win against G2. So I can understand how that sometimes turns into a negotiation, because from outside it's like, why are they not banning Draven? But they got Gragas. So it's like, oh, maybe there's like some trade-off they had in mind, or maybe they wanted to pick Draven 1-2 themselves because they banned Kate. It's funny to follow that kind of line of logic. I wanted to ask you about some of the teams, some of your competition. It's like, now we talked a little about G2 and the level of adaptability. What are some other reads that you have on G2? How do you view them as a team?
I'm really interested to see how they pair up internationally. A, because of the level, but B, because of the way they read the draft. And, like, I think Asian teams historically have a big pattern, and this happens every year at Worlds. And it's not just Asian teams, it's all teams, you know? Like, you come in with your prep, and it's the same thing, you know? This guy has never lost a game on LeBlanc. Give him LeBlanc. I can play against LeBlanc. Like, this type of thing, or like, I don't know, like, Olaf's a shit champion. Don't man Olaf against Adam. Like, these types of conversations, you know? So I think there'll be a degree of that at international events. But when that has, like, passed, I'm really curious to see how they do. I think they're good. Do I think they're as good as 2019 G2? I would say no. If you, like, compare them to the level of the competition.
Yes.
Like, I think that 29 G2 was better, personally. I think they still have weaknesses. I think they're great at, like, their early game is great, and I like the way they play. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of cool things to take away from them, but it's also hard to, like, honestly learn from watching G2, because a lot of the time it's just them, like, smacking the guys around, you know? So it's actually sometimes difficult to have a read on how good they even are, you know?
Okay, I think that's fair, yeah. It's like sometimes they've lost games where they got kind of lost in the sauce. With I remember the Talia Swain game against you guys. I thought that was madness. Hilly just recognized, I'm just never going to leave my Sivir, and I'll be okay. I don't care about these rocks. Weaknesses, do you want to share, or you're going to keep your secrets?
Weaknesses. I can't say too much, because I still think they're the same weaknesses. But I think that they, like all teams, have a very particular formula. And one of the reasons why I say I'm curious to see how they do internationally is because I think if people can figure out that formula, then they don't function very well as a team anymore. Like, there's a very particular way that they play the game, and I think it's the same in almost every game, frankly. And I think that once you realize that, and, like, we weren't able to stop them doing it, right? Clearly. So, you know, it's not like it's that fallible, right? But I think a team that's better than us, or us in better shape on the day, I think it's perfectly plausible that they can be kind of dismantled, which, you know, doesn't say anything special, because all teams can be dismantled if you have, like, the exact correct read on them and the exact correct ability to punish that read on them, right? No, I don't think that they are, like, a godlike team by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, no, that's a very interesting take. Like, contextually with the week one, I think that Astralis actually did a very, very good job of actively contesting, you know, the stacking waves around mid, and the waves that Caps was actively freezing, because I think a lot of the action happens around there. It's just whether there's a situation where bot lane is completely broken and they can just dive bot. Usually the massive snowball. It's like if you can track Mickey, you can kind of find whatever the next decision that G2 is going to bring you along on. And I think that they are good at punishing players that, for example, let's say, Renekton showed on top wave and they're around 5, there's 5 on mid-mid, they're just going to pull the trigger, they're just going to go, and they are very sharp at recognizing winning game states. I think that's something that they do very good. But I think the game against Astralis, it seemed there were many moments where I felt like Leader, at least talking to him after their game 2, it seemed like he had a very, very good understanding of what G2's next step was, and they didn't really, fall for, I don't want to call it bullshit, but sometimes you kind of fall for bullshit and you kind of give away more than you should, and you forget that you also know how to play the game, and there's a certain level of what is possible and what is not possible, and you can't put yourself in a position where you believe in what they do more than what you believe in yourself that you can do. I think Astralis did a pretty decent job of that in that game that they won.
Absolutely. I mean, I think their early support jungle movement is very, very good. I think that's like a big strength of theirs for sure. And I think that going back to their adaptability, like the problem is with like shutting down G2 is that you can't do it in draft because like I said, all teams have crutches, but you can't take away all of G2's crutches because they're very adaptable, right? So they will just find different champions that do the same thing and fill the same niche that they need in order to succeed in the better way that like happens to work best for them on that patch, So it's not like you can outmaneuver them and take away all the crutches and force them into a like checkmate situation in draft very often. I think a lot of the drafts that they lose are them like checkmating themselves.
Yes.
But it's very, very hard to be able to like accurately read and adapt to what they're going to do in a best of 5.
Vitality is also a very interesting team now after the first week. You guys had a rough game against them, but I take that with a grain of salt. I think Vitality in terms of, I think the drafts and the competition, I think even though they had a 3-0 very clean week where they were very dominant, then I believe the big test for them will be, of course, next weekend because they face G2 SK Astralis, which I wouldn't think was a really tough week before the season started, but now it really is. What is your take on Vitality so far? What do you think of yeah, I think that's the question. Nothing more to add.
I think Photon has had an excellent rookie season so far. I think he's been great. I think Upset and Kaiser seem to be getting along really well, and that's honestly the biggest thing that makes me think they're going to be good. Is that like they seem to be like having fun together and smiling together, and that's a huge plus for both of them. I think honestly, looking back at Upset, there's been a lot of times where he hasn't looked very happy on the teams that he's been on, and that's for me like one of the biggest red flags for performance that a player can have. And I think he and Kaiser, knowing Kaiser as I do, I think they will get on very well. I don't know Upset very well at all, but you get a sense for like roughly what a person is like, and obviously I have like insight from Humanoid and insight from Hylissang, right? So I think that Key and Kaiser will get on very well, and I think that is going to be a huge catalyst for them being super good together, especially because as far as I understand, he's a very vocal player, and I think that should synergize very well with Kaiser, so I think they're a good fit. I was initially skeptical that they would be able to sort out the kind of resource management on the team, because historically all of those players have been very high resource, including Bo. Like Perks is a like CS generator. The guy like creates extra CS on the map to farm somehow. It's crazy, and that's always been the way that he's played ever since like 2018 or even 2016. Upset, very high resource. Photon has been mostly playing kind of high resource carries, and Bo as well, but they've adapted really nicely. And like I think stats wise, Bo has like really not farmed that much and has basically just been going around the map murdering people. And that is a really good look for them, and that makes it really scary to play against them. So I think they have a formula that's working well so far. I agree with you that I think their read on the meta was good, and they had some really good drafts. I think our draft against them was quite difficult. So yeah, I mean I did not expect them to go 4-5 Darius Aurelian Soul without knowing where our Cho'Gath was going. Like that was a real like, okay, you got us. Like sure, that's the nightmare scenario that you do in draft, and you're like, guys, like if they do this, like congrats to them. Like they got us, like like they got us. So well played to them. So yeah, I mean, I think things look good for them, but you're also right that they haven't been like truly tested yet.
Okay, okay. I'm curious. Could you elaborate more on how Kaiser is as a person and player? Because I want to kind of tune that into my vision of Upset.
So I would say that he is one of the players that doesn't deal well historically with super direct feedback, um, which was like a source of tension between him and Humanoid for sure. Um, like we always worked it out, but that's like a big part. He's a very mechanically competent player. Like a lot of his focus on the game is kind of individual. I would say he sees the game much more from his personal perspective in terms of how strong his champion is, what point in the game he's at, like what he can do, rather than kind of a more global perspective. So he's very bot lane focused as a player, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that he will do better when he has teammates that are like pulling him towards
Okay.
them for whatever play, right? Like let's say in 2021, like when Mad was at their best was when Elyoyo was calling 1 minute in advance, like I'm gonna go and invade their bot side jungle. Kaiser, can you be there? And in those scenarios, like Kaiser will be there and he will commit to the play and he will go and like style on people and break their ankles. So when he has someone like pulling him into the fights, pulling him into skirmishes, then he looks really, really, really great. But he's not always as proactive as he could be.
Okay. Okay. I felt like the first portion, it felt like you were. I could put the same description on Hilly on the first portion, but the second
Yes.
part, the
Yes.
second part, Hilly likes to be very, very active in the decision making process, and I think how you elaborated on Kaiser, I can definitely tune that into a lot of memories. Seeing Kaiser play in Mad Lions with, of course, Elyoya. That's interesting. No, I think how well Upset worked with Hilly. I think that with how you elaborated on Kaiser, I think that they should definitely be like a good fit, because Elias can be very, very nurturing and very patient, and is very mindful of how he communicates with his peers. And when he feels like that is rewarding and that the environment is aligned with what he wants from practice, he's very, very competitive, then he is really, really in his element. And some of the things I've already heard from Upset, I think that they found a very, very good fit. But it's always, in the beginning, if you're winning, can be easy. It's all about how they deal with the first initial challenges. But I think that roster has experience in the right places and their mind in the right places. I'm excited to see how they continue. SK is another very interesting team. Unless you have something to add, sorry.
I was just going to add for the big difference between Kaiser and Hilly is that while Hilly is like a very emotional player, like he's very emotionally driven, that's a big strength of his. Kaiser is much more the like analyst prototype of person. He's very consistent. He's very logical. He's very kind of composed and thought out about the game and kind of methodical when it comes to his whole process of decision making for things. And that's very much him as a person. So I think he has a lot. He's not a very volatile person. He's usually very consistent down the stretch, and he usually doesn't struggle with like burning out, for example.
Okay. Well, it's that definitely the way you elaborate on players is so relatable to me, because I can instantly imagine it.
I think he and Upset are going to be very consistent together. Very, very consistent together.
Cool. I wanted to follow up with SK, the team that 3-0'd this first initial weekend. It's first weekend of regular split, so I don't think we need to put too much weight into it. But I felt like they look good. They look kind of good in their wins. What's your read on SK? What are your thoughts about SK Gaming?
About SK Gaming, I think that actually coming into the split, they're one of the rosters that I kind of looked at and thought like, I kind of like that roster. Like it has a nice balance to it. It has a good mix of personalities to it. I'll say as well that I think Swiffer has done an excellent job. He's one of the coaches that I've like chatted to a few times in the off season, and we've exchanged ideas on things. And like looking at the top 4 teams in winter, I honestly think that it's literally just the 4 teams with the best internal like environment and the best team culture, like the teams that actually kind of enjoyed their time playing on stage together. That was the big thing that leapt out to me. because I know that that's very kind of close to Swiffer's heart in terms of the way that he wants to coach and the way that he like his whole philosophy around how to create a good atmosphere and how to create an effective practice culture. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. I think their players are also individually performing very well, but I really think they're kind of greater than the sum of their parts. The big upside is obviously Exakick and DOS. I think those guys have been like way more consistently good than you would expect for a rookie bot lane. Obviously, DOS is not like a full rookie, but especially for Exakick, I think like you expect a rookie to come in and have pop-up games sometimes and look really great, but you don't expect it to be quite as consistent as Exakick has been. So I mean, big props to him.
No, for sure. It's like there's like these Hall of Fame rookies, like Elioya is there, Exakick is definitely there. Like there's definitely like these rookies that perform beyond the imagination. They just seem to be in their element when they're playing on stage. I think SK, what I like a lot about them, I feel like they've been very, very sharp at analyzing the trajectory of where a draft should go. And I feel like a big strength of theirs is how adaptable Certus and Irrelevant have been in that context. So let's say, I remember their game specifically against G2. There was a game where they first picked a Sejuani enemy match with Varus Graves, and then they slammed Sivir and Yuumi, and then there was a Lulu, and right off the bat they recognized, okay, it's going to be a front-to-back game where we need to be in mid and top. Has nothing to do with, less about the lane phase, more about how they are going to do contextually with how the game is going to go. Sorry, it wasn't Sejuani first pick, it was Elise first pick, sorry. And then they just slammed the Sion, and this was before Sion became Giga Meta and everyone started picking it. And they just recognized the pattern of where everything is going to go. And I think that Irrelevant and Certus have been very good at filling in wherever the gaps of the compositions will be. And then I think that in terms of how they just play out fights around objectives, it seems like there's a very clear idea in what they want to achieve when they draft. And I think that's also has been a very, very big strength for them.
Definitely. I do think that they've actually been ahead of the meta on a couple of patches in terms of draft. That specific draft that you mentioned is one of them for sure. I think they were really good at identifying the like how to draft around Elise, how to play with Elise in game. Like
yes.
I think like 5 days after that, like it was them and Hanwha Life were running that exact like same draft structure every time they got Elise, and I literally did like a presentation to our team about like this is how they're drafting Elise, this is why they're drafting Elise this way, this is how they're playing it in game, and this is what it's doing, So I think they've been really good at conceptually understanding how a draft fits together, and like you said, their execution has been really good as well. Like when we played them in a best of 5, honestly, like I think they're a good team, but I felt in the best of 5 that we were like considerably stronger. But I just felt like we hard lost the 2 red side games. Like I felt like I got mugged on red side by them. I think they execute their drafts really, really well. I think if they weren't so good in draft, it wouldn't have been a 5-game series, frankly.
No, I'm excited to see that progression. This first week really, as an outside party, makes me super excited about Europe. I feel like there's so many teams that have leveled up, and the competition is definitely tougher than it was in winter with my very limited view of the games since we only had 3 play days, but it seems like the competition, like looking at some of the matchups, when I think of Astralis facing off against anyone, SK against anyone, that's super exciting. And then there's also BDS. I think they don't look too bad either. It's seems like
definitely.
The competition is very tough.
Yeah, I don't know who keeps giving Adam Darius. Crazy. Who would do that? Yeah, it's one of those things.
I can play against Darius. Can you play against Darius?
Yeah, I can play against Darius. We had this in oh my god, we had it in 2021 with Jesu's Kalista as well. Our like scouting report came in for the day. Like guys, like they're so much better when they have Kalista. Just don't give them Kalista. Why are we banning Kalista?
I've had the exact same conversation about Kalista.
Yes.
Java's useless. Java support. Oh man.
Oh my god. Oh, I'm getting flashbacks. That's a bad one.
Which other team is intriguing to you? We don't have to talk about every single team because some of them are kind of redundant. Yeah.
Let's see. I think I mean, Excel is probably one of the most interesting ones to talk about. Now, I think like BDS and Astralis, like they're both cool teams and are kind of up and coming, and they have their unique things. But I think like the whole Excel situation is so interesting to dissect. You know.
How come? Now I need you to elaborate. Tell me about the Excel situation.
The Excel situation, I think, is such a like classic case of the team not being more than the sum of its parts. You know. Like you look at all the individual players and you're like, that's a good part. Like that's a good piece over there. Yeah. That bit looks good. And the team just doesn't look like a team. And it's so funny how consistently Splyce and Mad Lions has lost the off season in the last 5 years. And like how consistently the teams that have won the off season have not ended up winning, you know? Like it's actually been very, very, very reliable, I think. And I think the XL situation is like a classic case of like being in the off season and not having a full oversight on like why you are building this team with the players you are building it with. You know, like if your answer to the question why are you signing this player is because he's really good, then you're doing something wrong.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
Like players are not good or bad in a vacuum. They are good at X, Y, and Z and bad in X, Y, and Z conditions, you know, and they are helped or need these specific things in order to succeed. And I personally find that aspect of team building and roster building so interesting. And it's something that I like spend a lot of time thinking about. It's like honestly, I spend more time thinking about how the pieces fit together than how good the pieces are. You know, I think there are plenty of good League of Legends players in the world. Obviously, there are some players that are very niche or specialized or irreplaceable inside the teams that they're in. But again, they're irreplaceable because of the role they fill within their team, not because of the fact that they are just a 10 out of 10 in every metric. You know, like players like that don't exist.
That makes for sure. I'm 100% with you. It's like like some teams have the approach of just making a list of names, and Excel got like, oh, this is the second and the top laner, this is the third here, and they just went down a list of priorities rather than thinking of how everything is going to play out. Because at least always for me, the bottom line has been that I want to be able to imagine that we can create a scenario where a player could potentially be the best player in his position. And I basically would want to elevate risk in that position if I feel like the names that are common have a smaller upside towards that potential based on what my read is. That's why in 2018...
Yeah, completely agree.
In 2018, I had like Vitality was like, "Yo, do you want to grab all of these names that didn't feel like I can imagine a context where they are going to be the best player in their position, or should I take this risk on this roster that is, you know, they've worked together in Giants, I scrimmed against them, I spoke to them, I had deep interviews with them, and I could easily imagine how we can put this together to challenge Fnatic at the time." And I was just way more inspired by that because I could see a world where we would beat and win a potential, title in the right context and if we work things the right way.
Definitely. I think the big trap is the short-term mindset, you know, towards these types of things. And actually, like I think this is something that there are a few like groups of people who are guilty here on this one. I think one of them are the Jerry Krauses of the world, for people who watch The Last Dance, you know, like the general manager approach to like building your little like top trump empire of like your little like player cards. If this one's a 9 out of 10 on early game and a 9 out of 10 on mid game and a 9 out of 10 on team fighting, he must be really good. And we just put like 5 9 out of 10s together on a team and we win, right? Like that's the way it works, right? I think the other ones who like, from my experience in this off season, who are super short-term minded about it are actually the players. Like I think XL was like honestly a roster that was built for the most part by the players. That's the impression I got. Okay. And like I talked to so many players in this off season who told me that they didn't want to consider Mad Lions as highly as other teams because I wanted to go and sign Chasy. And like
Wow.
the number of people that told me they didn't want to work with Chasy, or they didn't want to work with a rookie in this position, or they didn't want to, and I'm like,
Why?
dude, do you know how many rookies I've taken to Worlds at this point? Like, it's not like, not even as like a flex, but like, it's just like, look at the historical data in front of you. Like, why do you not think that these people are capable of being good just because they're not a big name? You know, it like, irks me so much. I had, like so many players who were just really, really down on Chasy and were like trying to convince me, like, I would like to work for Mad Lions, but only if you go and sign like this other, like someone who I would consider to be like an average at best or slightly above average European top laner who's going to go to Worlds and get stomped by like the first Asian player that he plays against. And like this blew my mind how short-sighted a lot of the sentiment was, because I've actually never had to experience that in the off season, because usually I just like go and get the my favorite rookie player that I like, and they're like, sure, I want to come play for Mad Lions, you know, and like it's easy. I just go and get the rookies. But this year, we had a lot of potential changes, and we had a lot of like, it was a completely wide open field with like infinite possibilities. So I talked to like an incredible number of players this offseason, way more than I usually do. And I was really, really like gobsmacked by the overall like sentiment of chasing the good 9 out of 10 players, you know?
No, I feel like that's such a like borderline obvious move to just elevate risk in the top lane position based off of what has been going on in Europe, that it just makes like perfect sense to go in that direction. We have Chasy, Photon. I think that's, you know, natural that progression happened to elevate the level of top lane in the region and to redefine what the role is, because it's so essential. It's so important. And to imagine a world that people are going to be against this, like the Chase didn't have like some kind of bad boy reputation, nothing like this, right? It was just nameplate, who is this? Chasy. Like,
Chasy had all of the hallmarks of a player that like would be a successful import, like every single one of them. Like I literally went to the lengths of like showing players like, here are Chasy's competitive stats and here are his solo queue stats. Like, here are his solo queue stats in the last 2 months in Korean solo queue. Here are Summit's solo queue stats in the last 2 months into Korean solo queue. Guess who's a better? And players are like, it doesn't really matter. I don't care. Like, I want to play with whatever, you know, like name a like, you know, I'll let you decide which top laner comes to your mind first.
We are thinking about European exactly the same top laners, and we don't need to be mean.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was absolutely like stunned by it.
Oh, for sure. It's like in my mind, it's like, you know, you have certain players that are like elite tier, and these are players that you want to start off. Can you grab those players, elite tier players? There's like, you can count them on both hands in Europe. And then beyond that point, you need to, like, the intention in my mind from each team that is trying to design themselves to beat the top team, there needs to be either, like, if you're in a position where you're working with less resources, I think that you need to just elevate risk, you know? And then it's like you adjust your course depending on that. It's like if there's going to be an element of safety, then that element of safety better be damn high, and you need to be able to imagine your roster at some point competing for a minimum a world's position. Because I think if you do anything beyond that, to me, it kind of just doesn't make any sense, you know? So what's the point of competing if that's not what you're designing your team for?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we started the whole Mad project in 2020, the like number one question we asked for each player was not like, how good is this guy? It's like, how well does he fit with Humanoid? Because he was our only returning player, and like he was the only player we had signed. And how, like, can I see this person being as good as their opposite number on G2 within 2 years? Like, that's the evaluation criteria that we used. Because like back then G2 was like unstoppable god of gods team, you know, and they were just individually the best in every role, and that was the criteria. And obviously for like not all of them like ended up living up to those criteria, but I think that you're right that that's like where you start looking, you know, that's the question that you start asking. And I think the within 2 years part is an important part of that.
Yes. No, 100%. Everything is so, at least contextually for me in the last, like in Fnatic, everything was very short-term results driven, because that's just what they've kind of built for themselves, like the pressure and the tension from management and the fans. It's like everything, you need to fucking be performing all the fucking time. So that's like the only thing that we were chasing. And then by design as well, with how Summer Split played out, it was like, oh shit, we are one game away from not qualifying to playoffs, and then we're playing from the lower bracket, and then everything is just like a kind of a race. I wanted to ask you how. I imagine that this is a conversation that you always have with your staff and maybe with yourself, is when do you make decisions that are within a season? How do you find the balance between taking decisions for the long term and decisions for the short term, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Do you mean in terms of like roster? Do you mean in terms of training?
In terms of training more.
Okay. So in the past, I pretty much exclusively chose long term because it was a 9-week regular season, so that was an easy decision, you know. Now I think the schedule being so much more compressed and having 3 games per week makes it so that you have to focus more on short-term adaptation, because you have fewer games in the week and you have more competitive matches. Like, you have fewer scrim games in the week and more competitive games in the week, which means that, like, if you get the wrong read on the meta for that week, it's really punishing.
Yes.
Now you lose 3 games instead of 2, or you have a worse shot at winning 3 games instead of 2, you know? So you also can't necessarily do the same, like, because you have fewer days of scrims, like you have 3 instead of 4 now, you also don't have the opportunity to build up the week in the same way, where, you know, you're like, let's say your first 2 days are about meta adaptation, your first day is like meta adaptation, your second day is introducing a new concept to the team and continuing on the meta adaptation. By the third day, you roughly know what you want to play, and then you're like refining the new concept that you've introduced and like really like digging into it, showing more examples of it, doing a presentation, stuff like this. Then the fourth day is like the prep for your first opponent that weekend. Used to be like the kind of rough schedule that we had during the week, and that was a really good balance for like long-term kind of development of the team. This week, it's like the first 2 days are figuring out the meta, and then the final day is like prep for the new one, and you slot in whatever improvement you can along the side.
Yes.
The opposite side of that is that, like, because we have more games, we can have a lot more to learn from those particular games, right? So if there's a pattern that I've been talking to the team about in scrims, I can say, now I have more opportunities to show them, and here is us playing 3 games this weekend, and you can see this pattern highlighted here, here, and here in all 3 games, you know? And this is the pattern that we need to learn to take away from this week. So it's much more like, I find that I have less time to bring new ideas from other regions to the team, because I just don't have as much time to watch LPL, for example. But I have more concrete examples of us doing things really well or us doing things really poorly that are very easy for me to access, you know? Like, I don't have to go and watch 3 VODs to find like specific examples of this particular mid-game concept, because I can remember, like on the third dragon on Saturday, we did this really well, and I can show why it was good, you know? So you have to kind of get your concepts from a different place, but certainly I think it's harder in terms of long-term balancing. But, you know, you get some benefit from just playing more games as well. Like, that will make you a better team.
Okay. I'm curious with how the point system works. Now, in your context, you got second place in winter. Has that the fact that you guys have so much points, has that influenced any type of decision making at all, or is it just rock and roll? We want to win spring.
No, yeah, I wouldn't say so. I mean, our kind of approach from in terms of the narrative that I try to set within the team is that our aim is to be the best. Like, and that's different from saying that our aim is to win. And I think that links back to what you were saying about Fnatic as well. Like, our aim is to be the best, and in order to be the best, what you need to do, well, you need to improve every day. And if you improve every day, you're going to win some games. Like, it's going to happen, you know? It's a byproduct of the process of improving and of like trying to be the best person you can be and trying to help your teammates be the best people they can be so you can be the best team you can be, like it all builds on from the brick by brick approach of building up every single day, right? And I think the funny thing about what you said about Fnatic is that like their whole, and this is the same for G2 when G2 had a rough year, like their whole brands are built around winning. So when you stop winning, who are you? And I think that's actually a real problem when those teams stop winning, because they have nothing left to hold on to. If Mad Lions stops winning, we're still going to be Mad Lions. Like we're still going to have the same culture, and our fans are still going to love us for the same reasons that they do. And we're still going to be doing the things that we believe in. We're still going to be authentic to ourselves, and we're still ultimately, like from a business perspective, going to be able to sell who we are as Mad Lions to like sponsors, to fans, to whoever it happens to be that we are like we are entertainers at the end of the day. That's realistically what this industry is. And we still have all of those things that make Mad Lions, and that like make this a special place to work. I don't feel like Fnatic does, and that's a big issue in my opinion. Not just for the players, but also for the fans. Like I think that's a big part of like if Mad Lions were like had come 10th place in winter, would our fans turn on us in the same way that Fnatic fans did? I don't think so.
That's fair. I think it's also an additional layer that like a problem that also comes with size, that the extremes become incredibly louder and more extreme. It's definitely a thing of it's funny. It's like when I was negotiating my contract with Fnatic, it's like they leverage this idea of, you're joining Fnatic, you're gonna get paid a little bit less here, but you're joining Fnatic, you're gonna have so much fans. When in reality, I think it should be the other way around. Like we should get paid more for dealing with all of the bullshit, But it's definitely fun. But they aren't all bad, The majority of them are quite nice, because I think that's just how the world is, Majority of people are just nice. I wanted to ask you, like since you have had such a good history of implementing rookies, and you pride yourself on the fact of bringing a lot of them to the World Championship, in the context of what Fnatic has done now. So they are 0-3, and they are looking even worse than in the previous split. And I don't envy the position they're in, right? Because between winter and spring, there's not a lot of leeway for changes that you can make because of how the ERL structure is and so forth. But it is looking so cruel almost to kind of send in Oscarinin into the situation, and it seems like he's not ready at all. What is your general take on what Fnatic could do, or what's going on there as a whole?
I think it's an almost impossible situation. I think, frankly, from the beginning of the year, like the mistakes come from there, and we experienced like something similar with our own academy team, which like did very poorly in recent years. So I can kind of speak to it. I think that when like the first thing that I saw when I looked at the Fnatic roster at the beginning of this year and looked at like the fact that they'd hired a rookie coach from the ERL to coach this roster, I was like, yeah, this guy has an impossible job. Not that these players are like uncoachable or anything, but just that like this is not an easy position to be in, and this is going to require experience. Like you and I both know that like Marek is very demanding and very perceptive, and like if you don't earn his respect, it's gonna be a hard time for you. I imagine that the exact same applies for a lot of the players that were on that roster. I don't know them very well, but I can imagine, and it's the same with like any good player, frankly, right? Like that's normal for good players. That's the standard in the LEC, that like respect is earned, not given. And that's not to say that they didn't hire a good coach or anything, but it's just such a hard position to be in. So I think then you end up changing the coach, then you end up making roster changes, then you have a new coach that comes into a like already challenging situation where there are like undercurrents of things not fixed, and tensions between people that he's probably not aware of, and that he has to go and like walk into these like spider webs that are hanging around and like catch them on his face and then be like, what the hell is this, like, and try and deal with it in the best way he can. But I think Oscarina is really good. I think he's a super promising talent. He's a talent that like Mad honestly had their eye on for a while. And I think that the level that he's performing at right now is probably not representative of his actual ceiling. You know, like a lot of the things that when I watched their games this weekend, I think like this is not like there's like for example, there's like an Ornn E into the tower where he's playing Ornn into Camille last night. Like you don't do that if you're like Camille has ulti up, she just presses R and you die. You don't do that if you're like performing at your true level. Like he wouldn't be in the LEC. I've watched this guy play for 2 years. There's no way, you know. So there's definitely something going on there. Is it nerves? Is it bad team environment? Is it that he's not been like I don't know him very well as a person, so I don't know what he needs. But there's clearly something that he needs that he isn't getting. That's like the only thing that I can realistically say. For Advien, I like Advien a lot. I thought that he was a smart addition to Fnatic because I think he's great, like glue for a team. He's a lovely guy. People only have good things to say about him as a person, and he's the type of guy that I think can smooth over a lot of the like tensions and things that will come up in a roster that has Humanoid and Reckless on it. And I think he should be also someone that like will facilitate what you mentioned earlier that Razork requires. So I think a lot of the like emotional needs of the team can be met by adding Advien. So I thought Advien was a really smart addition. I thought Oscarina was a good addition. I'm honestly surprised that they're not doing better than they are because I thought they were like decent additions. But yeah, clearly there's something that Oscarina needs that he isn't getting. That's the big thing for me.
I feel like the biggest concern always, like with a team like this that has gone through so much turmoil, is that after something goes wrong, then the image of things being new becomes shattered, and the pain of a loss can become so much more extreme and really bleed into everything else. I think the most difficult thing for Fnatic from a like strictly strategic side, from how the roster is built, I think what makes the situation so impossible is that they have a player like Humanoid on contract, but there's nothing available on the market that would allow you to build a roster that would make Humanoid into the machine that we both know he could be. And I don't know if that's something that they can achieve even between spring and summer. And then it was the same as well with, Upset being on contract, Wunder being on contract. The fact that you have these very, very powerful building blocks and you can't piece something together to fully utilize them definitely makes the position so much harder to play out.
Completely agree. I think what you mentioned about kind of the like echoes of the past coming up and shattering the illusion of the honeymoon period is so relevant. And I think when I look at that roster, I think like in those scenarios, you need to have like a certain level of innate confidence, or the coach needs to take immediate and effective action to restore the team's confidence and to remind people of the things that they're good at. And I don't know Razork that well, but from what you said earlier, it doesn't like, I think he needs some of that like affirmation. And I think without it, he probably won't be as confident as he could be. I think Marek is a bit of a pessimist. I think Reckless is also not the type of player that's going to like turn around and instantly feel good and bounce back to his 100% and feel super great about it. And you can't expect the same. You can't expect that from Oscarina or Advien in their, like debuts at Fnatic. Obviously, Advien has been in AC before, but for Oscarina, like he's completely like fresh off the boat. So I don't think you can expect that like raw level of natural confidence straight away from them, like after immediate losses. And I think that is something that is going to make those echoes of the past coming up and those fears of going back to the way things were and people shifting back into the same old patterns and the same old like defeated mindset, the victim mindset, it's going to make it really, really deadly for them unless they can like find ways to believe in themselves, frankly. And I think there are, a lot of cases like that in the LEC, right? I think that's why some of the 10 kind of elite players that you mentioned earlier are elite players. Like for me, that's what separates them from the rest, because they're the ones that can, like, in the case of like Mad Lions this weekend, go and play 2 horrible games and then still like come in the next day with a smile and feel confident and help their teammates feel confident, like they just believe. And I think that is such an important quality for a championship winning player. It's something that every team needs, because every team, like you said, has down days. Every team has 0-2 or 0-3 weekends. Like, well, not every team, but like it's going to happen at some point. Like it's pretty likely to happen that you have 2 losses in a row, and you need to be able to bounce back from them.
Yes. Well, I think it just comes down to what you said before, right? The core thing is just adaptability, because so many things are going to be thrown your way. There's so many things that are inconsistent. So the things that you can control and are consistent, which is the day-to-day process and how you build your values, and this of course ties into team culture, that is what needs to be robust, and that needs to be prepared for any type of randomness a season can bring, because sometimes a player is sick, sometimes a patch is just completely messed up, or sometimes, like I've been hit by a car two times when I've walked to the office. Like
really?
shit happens. Yeah, we got hit by a car. The most recent split where I worked, I was on a lime, got hit by a car. I flew 3 meters, and I'm like, shit, I have scrims. And then I just kept liming to scrims. I told my manager to patch me up, just fucking patch me up. That was probably a bad idea. I should have probably gone to the hospital, because I was like vomiting the whole night after, which is a very weird reaction to being like physically hit. But yeah, I had scrims, I just had to go to scrims. It's just this is
gotta work.
The randomness of shit that can go down is something you need to be ready for. So just adaptability. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is like probably my favorite word now. Adaptability.
And when shit hits the fan, like you don't like step up to the level of the occasion. You fall, and you fall to the level of your preparation and your team culture and all the systems that you have in place. The foundations of the building. You can't fall through them.
Yes. Oh, that's such a beautiful way to put it. The worst thing is, when you went 0-3 on the weekend. Well, we need to have an intervention. We need to do everything different. Upper management is here. Now we need to do one-to-one meetings. We need to figure out what the issue is. We need to start everything over. It's like, oh, fuck. This is not the way. It's like we need to make everything set up before the season. Everyone needs to be bought in, and you need to really, really, stick to it, no matter what happens. Because the moment the players also feel like everything is result driven, then they will also become wildly inconsistent in what their mood is and what they are bringing to the table. And then there's a different layer of pressure that is not necessary.
Yeah. And often I feel when the upper management gets involved, there usually ends up being a certain degree of finger pointing, because the boss is asking whose fault it is, and that doesn't help a team. And that's something that like just doesn't happen at Mad, and it's one of the reasons that I've been happy here for so long. Like Till and I have like complete trust from the organization of like, okay, like our processes are good, our systems are good, and we're gonna like work it out over the long term. And like it's like investing in the stock market, like sometimes it's gonna lose 50%, sometimes it's gonna go down. You're gonna see like red numbers all over your screen, and you're gonna be like, oh shit. But like if you bought them at a good price and your process was good and it's a good company, it's gonna be okay. Like it's like volatility is part of the experience, and that's honestly part of the joy of competing and the joy of competitive sports, right?
No, 100%. If it wasn't hard and tricky, and the human element wasn't a part of it, and the passion wasn't a part of it, there would be no fun at all. I've taken up a lot of your time, and I want to squeeze in the question that Romain asked. Because we need to carry on the tradition. So I think that the gist of his question is pretty much, after a very successful 2021 and then a very tumultuous 2022, what are some of the learnings through based off the 2 years that were so vastly different that you implemented to make the training process as good as possible in 2023?
So honestly, at the end of 2021, I was like, awesome, we won a championship, but I wasn't that convinced that I had done the best job that I could do. And in 2022, I felt like for the most part, I did a really good job, but things kind of went to shit. Obviously, like, that is still my responsibility, right? I'm not trying to say that it wasn't my fault. That's not what I'm saying at all. I am the head coach. Everything is ultimately my responsibility. That's the way it works. But like, I was even like after the. So I show the team like I have like a library full of like clips, you know, like I think most coaches do, right? Where it's like here's your like early game clips and here's your mid game clips and blah 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 blah. And I compete with myself every year to see how many I can do, to see if I can do like more this year than I did last year. You know, like if I can show the team more good examples of plays this year than I did in the previous year. And in 2022, I think I showed the team like the most that I'd ever done, which was something like 150 or something like that. Like plays that I thought like this is a really fucking good play that I've seen from an LPL team or an LCK team or whatever it is or whoever it happens to be. Which was a lot. And honestly, in 2022, I felt like I did like some of the best work that I had done in terms of like how consistent I was, how good my routines were, how like the volume of the work that I did, the quality of it. I think it improved a lot. And so the big learning that I had was actually that I fucking love my job, you know, like I could turn around at the end of spring 2022, like missing playoffs, having one of the like hardest moments of my career, telling a rookie player that like, you know, breaking his dreams basically. And that, you know, sorry, you're not good enough to be here at the moment, or like the team, this is not the best thing for the team, you know, is the long and short of it. And still turn around and like be happy and love my job. And that was a huge weight off my shoulders actually, because I had all these questions about what things were going to be like post winning, you know, and if I had actually done a good job, or if like how much of my success was attributable to Humanoid and things like this. So the other thing that I took away was honestly just that like there were a lot of things from 2021 that I tried to recreate in the team in 2022 through like creating the perfect culture that I wanted and all these types of things. But I realized then that like you cannot kind of plug and play the culture that you want in the team. Just because I want the culture that is the most authentic to me, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the one that speaks to the players, and it's not necessarily going to be the culture that gets uptaken, and the one that they end up like they end up living out themselves, you know. So I learned in that way to be kind of more adaptable towards the players that we have, and also to be really careful about the players that we end up signing and thinking first about culture when we were looking to sign players, or making sure that we had kind of culture pieces in place. That was a big takeaway for me from 2022.
Okay. Very interesting. No, I think it's very evident in that you love your job and that you're very passionate about your job. I like to think that I'm good at reading people, and I felt that way from the first, from the first interaction that I remember, because I forgot the initial one when we lost. I think I was just too deep in my head, and I was thinking about my boy Jizuke and how we're gonna bounce back from from that painful loss.
Oh, of course, naturally.
So I'm happy that you reinformed me on this one. Now, this has been really, really great, Mac. I know that you have plans now. I could keep you here forever, you know. I tried to be very selective with what I wanted to bring up, because we could talk about so much. I would want to talk more about your players, and I would want to talk more about, you know, what is the ambition of Mad Lions for this year, in terms of how you view your progression and how your strengths and so forth. I feel like we could talk forever, but I know that you have dinner reservation. Is that the case? Or can I keep you?
That is the case. That is the case.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. You've been very kind, and I think you're doing a wonderful job at hosting. I think you asked really insightful questions. So
thank you very much
for everything. It's been amazing.
It's very easy when I am very interested. That's all I can say. I'm very interested in what you do. I have to keep you for one more minute though, because the tradition needs to carry on. You need to ask a question to my future guest.
Do you know who the future guest is?
No, Romain was the only one who ever knew.
Romain, you sneaky so-and-so. Okay, well, next episode is episode 42, correct?
Yes.
And 42 is the meaning of life, correct?
Yes.
That answers the question. Okay, so I would be really interested to hear from the next person that like, what is the thing that wakes them up in the morning? Like, to them, what is the meaning of life? You know?
Okay.
Like, what is the absolute number one thing that gets them going in the morning? What do they live for? Because I think that's one of the things that personally helps me to be to take steps. I'm not the best coach I can be yet, but it helps me to take steps towards the person that I want to be. You know, is that I know what I want in life, and I know what I value. You know, and I think that's like I said earlier, like at the end of your life, those are the things that you look back on, like the relationships, and that's ultimately what I value, is the sense of fulfillment that I get from having that, and from kind of living the journey that I live, which is wonderful. My dad has a quote that I'm printing out and putting in our office on the walls, and it's my dad plays a lot of golf, and he likes to say that it's important to stop and smell the flowers on the golf course.
Oh, that's very nice. I love the question, and for anyone that's watching, I think this is a sincere question that you should ask yourself, because having that so close to your sleeve allows you to pay attention. So I love the question. Thank you very much, Mac. This has been an absolute pleasure. I wish you continued success. Please kiss and hug Hilly from me, Niski too, even though sometimes Niski was annoying me, but I miss him super much. This guy made me laugh more than I can imagine with his comments and his... No, both of them, please give them my best, and I'll catch you around the studio. Thank you so much for your time, brother.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
All the best. Take care.
Bye.
Oh. Okay. Guys. That was brilliant. Holy shit. I'm so good at picking guests. I'm so good at picking guests. That is... I'm so happy that it plays out the way I imagine, you know, when I'm picking guests. Mac is brilliant, you know. Mac is truly one of a kind. It will be, you know, it's like when I've had a conversation that I know that I will personally listen back to, is really, you know, a hallmark for me personally, that you know, it was a good conversation. I don't know who we're gonna have next. I was talking to our Dominate about doing an episode, Monte Cristo about doing an episode. Maybe I can ask Kedro, someone that I would want to get to know more, because I don't know him that well. Is I would like to talk to LS, just to get to know him, you know. I've only gotten to know him through the small parts of content that I've you know, consumed, and I don't know how he feels about me, you know, because my last interaction with LS was when we were both working with Super Hot Crew / Meet You Makers, and that is you know, a very long time ago. I've changed a lot, he's changed a lot, you know. And I would be interested to get to know him. I generally just feel intrigued by people that are passionate, you know. And if I get the feeling that you're super passionate about what you're doing, I am hooked. And that could be about anything, you know. It's like when Mac was talking about juggling, bro. It blew my mind. That blew my mind. Now, like, I wanna research juggling right now. and look at the videos of this, you know. Like it's crazy how this thing kind of, you know, just as long as humans are involved and passion is involved, then it's too interesting to look away. Sorry for not reacting to any of the subscriptions. I don't read chat as well. I don't read chat. I just have full focus. It's like I put away my phone. I just basically just look at my guest. You know, I just look at my guest in the eyes, even though he doesn't see me. But I'm focusing fully on the guest. Can you get Bwipo? Bwipo could be very nice too. Yeah, it's like if I could, you know, I would talk to Mac for another hours. I could talk to him forever. You know, that's. But I have to be fair. You know, he's coaching a team in the LEC, and he's going off to celebrate with Marek Brazzolini. You know, this is. What about Hedon? Yeah, that could be maybe something in the future. Let's see. What do we do now? That's the question. Do I have energy? Broxah could be interesting too. Yeah, like that's the beauty of League of Legends, right? It's like we have so many different great personalities in the league scene. Yeah, I'll think about who to cook up next. I'll think about it, guys. Now the question is, what do I do? Vega V2 could be interesting too.
He was like 60% win rate.
Vega V2 always, I like Vega V2. Peter Dunn we already had on. But my man Peter Dunn, he always has clapped internet connection, man. Clapped audio. Like my man needs to figure it out, dude.